Welcome, traveler of dreams. Tonight's video features a chilling compilation of the most terrifying stories to set the perfect mood for Halloween. Before we get started, remember to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss future horror stories like these. Also, let me know where you are watching from, so go ahead and leave a comment. Let's begin. I wouldn't have pegged myself as the sort of person who'd get jittery over a high school reunion. Yet the thought had been gnawing at me for months, like an animal worrying a bone. When the email invite arrived in my inbox, Hawthorne High, Class of 2010 reunion, I froze. 10 years vanished in a blink. 10 years since I swore I'd never step foot inside that gym again. But I replied yes. Not out of nostalgia or longing to reconnect, but because I wanted to step into that room and prove I wasn't the girl they'd torn apart piece by piece. Back then, I was the big one. At 17, I weighed close to 320 pounds, and that number seemed to give everyone a pass to treat me however they pleased. Every taunt, every giggle in the hallway, every low moo sound as I passed groups of boys that stayed with me. But the memory that burned deepest was the cafeteria. The day Tara Brightwell, the blonde cheerleader who always made sure she had an audience, stood on a bench and yelled land whale. The whole room erupted. Even the teachers didn't intervene. I went home, locked myself in the bathroom, and cried until my skin was raw. That day I swore I'd show them all. Now a decade later, I sat tearing open Amazon packages with trembling fingers, shapewear, hair extensions, press-on nails. For the past year I'd been using a medication that promised transformation. Advertisements called it miraculous, doctors called it semaglutide, online forums called it the cheat code. I'd sworn I'd never resort to needles, but after years of losing and regaining the same 40 pounds, I gave in. And for the first time ever, the weight stayed off. By June, I was down 85 pounds. My cheekbones looked honed enough to cut glass. My collarbones jutted like they belonged to someone else. For the first time, I could zip a dress and not cry. On the night of the reunion, I parked outside Hawthorne High, staring at the building that had been my personal hell. I saw the gym windows glowing, heard music thumping faintly. My hands clutched the steering wheel slick with sweat. "Get it together, Laya," I muttered. "You didn't go through all this for nothing." I flipped the mirror down, touched up my lipstick, and stepped out. My heels struck the pavement with a crisp sound, confident even if I wasn't. The moment I pushed open the gym doors, the atmosphere shifted, heads turned, mouths opened. No joke, Tara Brightwell's jaw actually went slack. "Lila?" she gasped, clutching her necklace like she'd seen a spirit. "Still on Earth?" I smiled slow and sweet. "Oh no, honey, I fly now." Her fake laugh was the music I'd been waiting for. Suddenly the same classmates who once whispered behind my back were flocking for photos, hugs, my Instagram handle. That's when I saw Ryan Blake, my old crush, the football captain I'd filled diary pages over though he'd barely noticed me. He looked incredible, crisp shirt, close cropped hair, the same smirk that used to melt half the cheer squad. "Wow," he said, handing me a drink, eyes scanning me up and down. "You're a whole different person." I burned the old version, I said, and just like that, we fell into conversation, easy, familiar, almost too familiar. By night's end, I was in his loft downtown. Minimalist furniture, abstract art, a coffee machine shaped like a spaceship. We were kissing, laughing, tugging at each other's clothes when suddenly my stomach clenched like a fist. The room spun. I barely shoved him away before collapsing, retching so hard I thought my insides would tear. The last thing I saw was Ryan's panicked face as he dialed 911. I woke in the ER with an IV in my arm. A nurse said dehydration, malnutrition, side effects from the injections. Then I heard a voice beside me. Guess we've got more in common than I thought. Ryan lay on the neighboring stretcher, shirt half open, hooked to fluids. Turns out he'd been using the same drug, abusing it just like me. "I threw up 3 times last week from eating a salad," he said weakly. But hey, anything to impress, right? We both laughed, embarrassed but relieved. We tried quitting, really tried, but the weight crept back fast, like it had been hiding behind a curtain waiting for us, and we couldn't take it. That's when we found the group, a hidden Reddit enclave, invite only. They called themselves the Shining Circle. People there weren't just using the drug, they were forging prescriptions, trading black market vials, microdosing in secret. Ryan got us in. The first package arrived in a plain black box. No return address, no instructions beyond 1 shot per week, no refunds, and it worked. No nausea, no dehydration. We looked better than ever. My Instagram blew up. Ryan became obsessed, skipping work, weighing himself 3 times daily, stopping mid-kiss to check his reflection. Then came the deaths. A girl on the forum collapsed in a tanning salon, heart failure. Forensics found amphetamines in her vial. I panicked. Ryan shrugged. She was probably on other stuff. People exaggerate. But then he started seeing things, hearing voices, heart racing for no reason. One day he collapsed on the treadmill. That's when I learned he wasn't just using, he was doubling doses and secretly selling under the username Ghost Newton. The last time I saw him, we fought. I begged him to stop. He screamed that he'd rather die than be ordinary again. He stormed out. A week later, he vanished. His apartment was spotless, like he'd erased himself. The only clues, a blood-stained towel and an empty crypto wallet. The police questioned me. I told them maybe he ran off with a model, but deep down I knew Ghost Newton had consumed him. For months I spiraled, eating to fill the emptiness. Ice cream, fried chicken, anything to dull the hollow ache. My body swelled fast and angry. Nearly a year later, I saw him again. Not on the news, not in a graveyard, but at a resort buffet in Florida. I spotted him shuffling through the crowd in a sweat-soaked linen shirt, carrying a tray stacked with chocolate donuts. He was enormous, almost unrecognizable, but it was him. "Layla," he said, out of breath, eyes wide. We stared across the room for a long moment. Then he shuffled closer, raised the tray, and with a crooked smile said, "Still shining, huh?" I gave a weak smile. He laughed, handed me a donut. Me too. We sat by the pool that afternoon eating in silence. He told me he'd faked his disappearance, set up the blood, the empty wallet, everything. He'd gone underground when some circle members got exposed. One girl, he said, had literally melted, skin necrosis, body breaking down from within. I stared, horrified. He just shrugged, frosting smeared on his lips. "Maybe this is who we were always meant to be," he said, patting his massive stomach, fat and full of lies. The sun burned on my skin. I looked at my own bloated body, stretched and raw with shame. And for the first time in years, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because maybe he was right. Maybe this was the only truth left. I rarely gave my workplace much thought. It was just another tech company located in the heart of downtown Benton. One of those mirrored high-rises that appeared more impressive on the exterior than they ever felt once you were inside. The carpeting held the faint scent of scorched coffee. Everyone reheated old pasta for lunch, and the air conditioning droned so loudly it smothered your own thoughts. My name's Kara Mitchell, 26 years old, working as a customer support associate. Not glamorous, but it kept the rent paid and provided health coverage, so I clocked in 5 days a week without complaint. I'd grown up 2 hours away in a tiny town where every face was familiar. Moving here after college made the city feel overwhelming, too fast, almost alien. I missed the predictability of my hometown, but anonymity had its appeal, or at least, that's what I believed. I didn't have close friends at the office. I exchanged pleasantries with the marketing team, sometimes grabbed lunch when schedules aligned, but mostly kept to myself. The one constant was Lucas Reeves, a quiet IT guy who sometimes drove me home. We weren't really friends, just carpool partners. Lucas blended into the background, same faded hoodie every day, hair hanging in his eyes, always absorbed in his phone. He barely spoke, which suited me fine after a long workday. That was my routine. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, until the note appeared. It happened on a Wednesday, right in the middle of a week I already wanted to end. I sat down at my desk with a cheap coffee from the gas station, set down my bag, and started to wake up my computer. That's when I noticed it. A folded sheet of paper tucked under my keyboard. No decorative paper, just plain white printer stock, 4 words, written slowly in blue ink. "You are incredibly beautiful." That was all. No signature, no doodles, nothing to hint at who had left it. At first I laughed, not because I was charmed, but because it felt oddly outdated. Who even does that anymore? A secret admirer note like it was sophomore year again. I held it gingerly, like it might sting. "All right, secret admirer," I murmured, smirking. It didn't upset me. If anything, it was sweet in a corny way. That evening, I slid into Lucas's old Civic for our usual ride home. He always drove as if he were late for something, his knuckles pale on the wheel. "You won't believe what I found today," I said, buckling up. He glanced at me briefly, then back at the road. "What's that?" "Somebody left me a love note," I said, literally folded paper under my keyboard. 4 words. "You are incredibly beautiful. Can you believe it?" He didn't laugh, didn't even smile. His grip on the wheel tightened and his jaw stiffened. "Did you tell HR?" His voice was flat. I blinked. "What?" "No. Why would I?" "It's not a big deal. You should report it," he said without looking at me. "Come on," I teased lightly. "Was it you? Be honest." But he said nothing else the entire ride. I brushed it off. Lucas was always peculiar, always serious. Maybe he thought I was careless. I didn't dwell on it. But the next week, my manager, Mr. Winslow, called me into a conference room with one of the HR reps. "Kara," Winslow began, carefully folding his hands. "We're investigating a situation and need to ask if Lucas Reeves has ever made you uncomfortable." The question hit me like a shock. "Lucas? No. He's quiet, but no." The HR rep, a woman named Tanya, leaned forward. "We're not asking you to accuse him of anything. We just need to know if he's ever crossed a line with you." "No," I repeated, though a wave of unease crept in. "Why?" They exchanged a look I didn't like. "We can't share details at this time," Tanya said, "but if anything unusual happens, come to us immediately. Understand?" I nodded, though my stomach coiled. That night, Sophie Clark from accounting messaged me on Teams. "Did Winslow talk to you about Lucas?" "Yeah," I typed back. "Why?" Her typing bubbles appeared, vanished, then reappeared. He used to give me rides too. Then he started showing up at my gym and my yoga class everywhere. My neighbor saw him parked on my street one night, just sitting in his car for hours. I stared at my screen, my hands clammy. "Please tell me you're joking," I wrote. "I wish I was," she replied. The real nightmare came that Monday. We were all crammed into the big glass conference room, 20 of us hunched over laptops and projectors. Mr. Winslow asked Lucas to present a client report. Lucas plugged in his USB drive, opened a folder, and clicked the wrong file. The screen erupted with a video. At first, it looked like explicit content, but then my blood ran cold. It was Sophie and Lucas, or at least disturbingly realistic AI versions of them. Their faces, their movements, rendered in grotesque, violent scenarios. Lucas lunged for the keyboard, slamming escape, but the computer lagged. For 5 excruciating seconds, everyone saw everything. Winslow yanked out the HDMI cord. Security stormed in minutes later, dragging Lucas away before he could speak. The room buzzed with whispers, fear, disgust. HR had us sign paperwork before leaving, swearing secrecy. They called it an isolated incident, but it wasn't. A week later, an anonymous email hit my inbox. No subject line, just one sentence in the body. "You laughed. Now you'll see how much fun it really is." Attached was a file. I couldn't bring myself to open it, but someone from legal did. Their face went pale. "It's you," they whispered. I didn't need further explanation. Days later, just when I thought it might all fade, I opened my mailbox outside my apartment. A folded paper, plain as before. "You always thought I wasn't worthy." No envelope, no address, just sitting there. That one broke me. It meant he knew where I lived. From then on, I lived on edge. Every car idling too long on my street spiked my pulse. Every shape outside my window turned my blood cold. HR said Lucas had disappeared. Police refused to share details. No one knew if he was in custody, on the run, or something worse. All I know is, I never saw him again. Yet sometimes, late at night when I log into my laptop, I swear I hear the faint ping of a notification, like someone is still out there watching. Because monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they hold open the office door for you, drive you home, sit 2 desks away, and you don't realize until it's too late that they've already claimed your story as their own. I never expected that looking back on my middle school years would reveal that the friend I loved most would one day become the source of my worst nightmare. I met Maya Reed when I was 12. She was fearless, sharp-witted, and wild, the kind of girl who drew everyone in. I was quieter, more cautious, but somehow we balanced each other out. By the time high school began, we were inseparable. She called me her sister, and for years I believed it. We shared secrets, traded clothes, and talked endlessly about our futures. But when I entered my 20s, everything changed. My health began to fail, and I was diagnosed with a condition that left me partially disabled. I used a wheelchair most of the time, but at home I preferred to crawl or slide around to avoid straining my arms. It wasn't pretty, but it was my way of holding on to my independence. Through all that, Maya stayed by my side, or so I thought. She'd say things like, "You and me against the world," and I clung to those words like a promise. So when she told me that she and her boyfriend needed a place to stay, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said without a second thought. Looking back, I should have thought twice. When they moved in, I had only one request. Just one. "No big dogs, please," I told her as we carried boxes into the house. I reminded her that while I loved animals, one big leap or shove could easily knock me over if I wasn't in my chair. She waved me off with a grin. "Relax," she said. "You know I'd never do that to you. No dogs, promise." I trusted her completely. But 3 weeks later, she broke that promise. They brought home a pit bull, hyper, unneutered, completely untrained. The thing was a living tornado. I love dogs, but this wasn't a playful pet. This was chaos with teeth and claws. "Maya," I said that first night, as the dog launched across the couch and sent a cup flying. She shrugged, sipping her wine as if nothing happened. "She's sweet," she said. "She'll calm down." Her boyfriend laughed and tossed a toy. "Just a puppy," he added. But she didn't calm down. Every time I left my wheelchair to crawl across the floor, the dog was there, jumping, licking, pushing. Maya's idea of discipline was yelling down while scrolling on her phone. One morning I went outside to grab my wheelchair from under the back deck. Before I even saw it, the smell hit me. My wheelchair was drenched, not with rain but urine. Dog urine soaked into the cushion, dripping from the wheels. I froze, staring. That chair wasn't just metal and rubber. It was my freedom, my mobility, my life, and it was ruined. "Maya," I yelled. She appeared above me, coffee mug in hand. "What's up?" she asked casually. "Your dog pissed on my chair," I shouted, furious. She blinked. "Really? Damn, I didn't notice. Sorry." That was it. No guilt, no help, just a hollow apology. So I dragged myself through the wet grass, hosed the chair down while she watched, and then sat in it, soaked in filth, just to get to class. The humiliation burned so deep I couldn't even cry. After that, things spiraled. Trash began piling up because they never took it out, and the dog loved shredding garbage. One night I came home to find a torn trash bag exploded on the stairs, food scraps leaking down the hallway to my room. I stepped right in it. The stench was overwhelming. Instead of yelling, I wrote a note on the fridge in thick black marker. "Clean up the damn trash in the hallway." The next morning, Maya stormed into the kitchen, pointing at it. "What's this?" she demanded. "The truth," I snapped. "Do you know how it feels to crawl through garbage because you two won't take out the trash?" She crossed her arms. "You don't have to talk to me like that. That's rude." I laughed bitterly. Rude as me dragging myself through filth because you're too lazy to clean up. But she didn't care. To her, I was the problem, not the mess. Then came the bathroom. Her long black hair clogged the drain every day. The tub and tiles were coated after every shower. I'd ask her to clean it, and she'd just giggle, "Oops, forgot." Every shower, I'd spend half my time peeling her hair off my legs, gagging as it stuck to me. And while I was drowning in disgust, her boyfriend lost his job. Bills went unpaid: electricity, internet, gas. Guess who paid them? Me. "I'll give you my share next week," he'd say. Every week. I started taking photos of receipts just to prove I wasn't imagining things. The tension in that house could have snapped steel. Then one afternoon I came home to find a stranger in the guest room. Maya's mother. "Oh, don't mind me," she said with a grin too wide to be kind. "I'll just stay a little while." That little while turned into 4 months. She paid no rent, offered no help, acted like she owned the place. The breaking point came when I told Maya I was moving out. "I'll be taking my bed," I said, her face twisted. "Where's my mom supposed to sleep then? You'd really do that to her? That's cold." I laughed in disbelief. "Cold? It's my bed, my house. Your mom doesn't pay for anything." That's when her mother snapped. "You ungrateful bitch," she screamed, lunging at me. Her hand cracked across my face, sending me crashing out of my chair onto the floor. Pain exploded across my head as she straddled me, hitting and clawing. I tried to shield my face while my blood splattered on the floor. "Stop, Mom, stop." I heard Maya shout, but not "don't hurt her." Instead, she yelled, "You'll go to jail for hitting a disabled person." That was her concern. Jail, not me. Maya finally dragged her mother off, and I crawled into my room, locked the door, and called 911. Police arrived minutes later. They dragged her mother out screaming, still trying to lunge at me. At the hospital, I sat in the ER, my face swollen and bloody. Then Maya and her boyfriend walked in. "Please don't press charges," she begged. She didn't mean it. "You know how my mom is, and like a fool, I didn't press charges. I regret that every single day." Not long after, I left that house, packing my clothes, my wheelchair, and whatever dignity I had left. They never paid me back. The landlord charged me for damages, scratched walls, stained tiles, the smell of dog urine everywhere. I refused to pay. That house still haunts me, not with ghosts, but betrayal. A month later, Maya texted me one last time. "You didn't have to make such a big deal out of it." I stared at it, fury burning through me, then replied, "Burn in hell. Don't ever contact me again." I blocked her number and never saw her again. Last I heard, she, her useless boyfriend, and her psychotic mother moved in with an aunt. Poor woman, she has no idea what's coming. I never expected to be the type of person who reflects on my 20s with a sense of unease. People usually describe those years as the best of their lives. Affordable apartments, spontaneous night drives, friendships that feel like family. For me, they're the years I'd rather erase. My name is Claire, and I'm 26 now. But everything began when I was 21. Back then, I was lost. I'd left college after just one semester because the tuition crushed me. Instead of following the journalism path I once dreamed of, I ended up working shifts at a diner outside the city limits. It was the kind of place that always smelled like scorched bacon no matter the hour, where regulars left a single quarter tip like it was some sort of punchline. I lived in a cramped apartment off Willow Avenue, with flaking paint, a clanking radiator, and neighbors whose constant screaming meant I didn't need TV for entertainment. Still, I told myself it was only temporary. I'd save up, return to school, maybe get out of Michigan. Then came the gathering. It wasn't an official high school reunion, more like one of those casual Facebook-organized events. A bunch of people I used to know decided to meet at a local bar one Friday. At first, I ignored the invite. High school hadn't exactly been my bright spot. But then, I saw a name, Megan Hart. That name hit me like a blow. Megan had been my closest friend through middle school and much of high school. We were inseparable, the kind of girls who swapped clothes, whispered secrets, and planned escapes to bigger lives. But everything shifted in junior year. She fell in with a different crowd, the kind of kids who thought drinking in graveyards was the height of rebellion. At first I tried to stick by her, but eventually it felt like she was more interested in tearing people down than lifting me up. By senior year, we barely spoke. Still, seeing her name stirred something inside me, nostalgia, curiosity, maybe loneliness. Against my better judgment, I clicked going. The bar that night was crowded and reeked of cheap beer and cologne. Everyone seemed a little older, heavier, more worn down. I was sipping a weak rum and coke when I saw her. Megan? She hadn't changed much. Same long dark hair, same sly smile that made you feel like she knew a secret you didn't. She spotted me immediately. "Claire," she said, eyes bright. Nobody had called me that with warmth in years. "Megan," I replied, forcing a grin. "It's been ages." She hugged me, almost too firmly. And in that instant, it was like we were 16 again, skipping class to sit on the bleachers and gossip about boys. We spent most of the night catching up. She told me she was living in a rental house not far from where we grew up, working part-time at a boutique and freelancing online. She laughed at the word freelancing like it wasn't much. She asked about me, and I admitted the truth. I was still waitressing, barely scraping by. Her eyes softened. "You always deserved better, Claire. You were the smart one." That pierced me. No one had called me smart in years. By the end of the night, I was tipsy and intoxicated by nostalgia. When Megan asked if I wanted to hang out sometime, I said yes. At first, it felt great. We started seeing each other once or twice a week, grabbing coffee, driving around like old times, sitting in her living room and talking until too late. She had a way of making everything feel like an adventure again. But there was an edge to her, the way she watched people, the bite in her jokes, the sense she always knew more than she should. One night, she leaned back on her couch and said, "You know, I always thought we'd run this place someday, like we were untouchable." I laughed nervously. "You always pictured us as Bonnie and Clyde." "Maybe we still could be," she said, half smile, half dare. I thought it was just a joke. About 3 weeks into our renewed friendship, she asked me for a favor. "Can you drive me to this guy's house?" she said casually. "It's just across town." I didn't think much of it until we arrived. The place was dark, decaying, clearly abandoned. She told me to wait in the car. 10 minutes later, she came back with a backpack, tossed it in the back seat and said, "Drive." I didn't ask. I should have, but I didn't. Later, when she used the bathroom at my apartment, I peeked inside the bag, bundles of cash. My pulse raced. When she came out, she caught me looking. For a moment, her eyes went cold like a predator's. Then she smiled. "Don't worry about it, Claire. Some people owe me, that's all." "You want in, though? I could use a partner." I shook my head. "I can't. I'm not. I don't want to be involved." She smirked. "That's what you always say, but you're still here." Weeks blurred into months, and I couldn't pull away. She had a way of making me feel important. She'd buy me dinner, cover my gas, slip me cash when rent was due. But every kindness had a hook. "See? I take care of you," she'd say. "That's what friends do. Someday you'll take care of me." I kept telling myself I wasn't really involved, that I was just her driver, her confidante, her old friend. But deep down, I knew. The breaking point came one night when she showed up at my apartment, frantic. "Can I stay here? Just for tonight?" she said, breathless. "What happened?" "Nothing. Don't ask. Just please." She slept on my couch, and I tried not to notice her backpack seemed heavier than before. The next morning, she was at my kitchen table drinking my coffee like she owned the place. "You know," she said, "you're the only person I can really trust. Everyone else would sell me out. But you're solid." I didn't know what to say. My hands trembled around my mug. Then she leaned closer. "And I know you, Claire. You think you're better than me, but you're not. You've got just as much darkness in you. You just hide it better." I tried to laugh it off, but her gaze was steady, too sharp. That was when I realized I wasn't her friend. I was her project. It all collapsed the night she asked me to drive her again. I said no. I don't even remember the excuse. Work, exhaustion, something. She didn't take it well. Her smile faded. "You're not going to bail on me, are you?" "I can't keep doing this, Megan. I don't even know what you're involved in, and honestly, I don't want to." For a long moment, she stared at me. Then she leaned back and laughed softly. "You think you get to walk away? Claire, I covered your rent last month. I bought your groceries. You think that was free? You owe me." Her words sliced through me because she was right. I had let myself depend on her, and now I was trapped. The last time I saw her was 2 weeks later. She showed up at the diner where I worked, slid into a booth like any ordinary customer, except her eyes were different, harder. She ordered black coffee. When I brought it over, she held my wrist just a little too firmly. "You're not answering my calls," she said. "I've been busy. Don't lie to me." Her grip tightened, nails pressing into my skin. "You think you can cut me off after everything? You wouldn't even be standing here if it weren't for me." I yanked my hand free, voice unsteady. "We're done, Megan. I can't do this anymore." Her smile returned, slow and chilling. "We'll see." Then she stood, left a 20 on the table, and walked out. I never saw her again after that night. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I see her car parked across the street from my apartment. Sometimes my phone buzzes with an unknown number, and when I answer, there's only silence. I don't know if she's still out there watching, or if she's already moved on to someone else. All I know is that letting an old friend back into your life doesn't always bring nostalgia. Sometimes it invites your worst nightmare. I didn't expect a single childhood memory to linger so vividly after all these years, yet it never left. Now that I'm in my 30s with 2 kids of my own, every morning drop-off at their school stirs a faint chill along my neck. It drags me straight back to a bright spring afternoon when I was 5, standing on the cracked pavement of my elementary school's playground, witnessing something I couldn't truly comprehend until much later. My world back then was small, just my parents, my classmates, the neighbors, and my best friend Damon. He was 6, lean, restless, and always a step ahead. He had better toys, flashier sneakers, and the kind of reckless confidence that made him seem invincible. While I played it safe, Damon pushed limits, climbing too high, running too far, and laughing when teachers scolded him. We went to Meadowbrook Elementary, a squat red brick school in a quiet Midwestern town. The building formed an L shape, the long side filled with classrooms, and the shorter wing rarely used, old art rooms, storage, and forgotten equipment. The street curved around its edge where parents parked to collect their kids. It was the kind of place where the swings creaked, the paint blistered, and recess sounded like an untamed ocean of laughter and shrieks. For me, those 20 minutes were the highlight of every day. But that particular afternoon, things were different. I was seething because Damon had done something that felt unforgivable. He'd stolen my colored markers. That might seem trivial, but at 5, your markers are precious. My mom had bought them for me, 12 bright colors that gleamed like candy wrappers. I guarded them like treasure in my desk. Damon had swiped them during math and used them to doodle cartoons across his worksheet. I could feel the heat in my cheeks when I saw him coloring with them. "Those are mine," I hissed across the aisle. He grinned. "Not anymore." That smirk made something harden inside me. He always got away with it because he was older, bolder, faster. But not this time. I silently promised I'd make him pay. When recess came, revenge was all I thought about. The blacktop buzzed with shouting kids while teachers stood chatting, styrofoam cups in hand, barely looking our way. Damon wandered off toward the back corner of the school, near the unused wing. I figured he was up to something, maybe climbing the fence or digging through the grass for lost balls. Still angry, I trailed him, but as I rounded the corner, I stopped cold. Damon wasn't alone. A car was idling at the edge of the lot, a faded blue sedan with chipped paint and rust along the bumper. Its passenger door was open, and inside sat a man I didn't recognize. He wore a cap low over greasy hair and leaned toward Damon, holding something out. Candy. At least that's what it looked like, a small, wrapped bar catching sunlight between his fingers. "Hey kid," he called softly. "Want one? Got plenty more inside." Damon froze near the curb, staring. I was just a few feet away, hidden by the corner, peeking. At that age, I didn't understand danger. Words like kidnapper or predator didn't mean anything yet. What confused me was why the man didn't just get out and hand Damon the treat. Instead, he kept motioning for him to come closer. "Come on," he said. "Hop in real quick, I'll give you a whole box." Damon stepped onto the gravel, curious. And then something mean sparked in my 5-year-old brain. This was my moment. I could ruin it for him, pay him back for stealing my markers. I stuck out my tongue and shouted, "Hey, Miss Kelly's calling you. She said if you don't come back now, she's telling your mom you went past the fence." Damon turned sharply, glaring. "Shut up, Noah," he snapped. "You're just mad because he likes me, not you." I smirked, satisfied I'd gotten under his skin. "Teacher, teacher," I sang out mockingly, dragging the words. That's when everything changed. The man in the car slammed the passenger door with a loud thud. Another man, someone I hadn't noticed, sat up in the driver's seat and threw the car into reverse. The tires spat gravel as the sedan jerked backward, speeding off down the road. Damon turned in time to see it go, his face twisted with fury. "You scared him away," he yelled. "He was giving me cookies, you jerk." I burst out laughing, oblivious to what I'd just stopped. "Crybaby," I teased, waving my arms. Damon's fury exploded. He charged at me, shouting he'd punch my nose. I screamed and sprinted across the playground, and that's when a teacher intervened. Miss Kelly stormed over, sunglasses slipping down her nose. "Enough," she barked. "What's going on here?" Damon, flushed and crying, shouted, "He scared off the candy man. He was giving me cookies and Noah ruined it." Her face shifted instantly. Her eyes widened, color draining from her cheeks. "What did you just say?" she whispered. Damon repeated himself, pointing toward the parking lot. Miss Kelly didn't hesitate. She blew her whistle so hard the sound bounced off the walls. "Everyone inside now," she yelled, waving her arms urgently. Kids groaned, thinking recess was over early, but her voice carried a tone none of us had heard before, tight, panicked, commanding. Inside, she pulled the blinds shut and made us sit on the rug. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "If anyone you don't know talks to you outside this school, you do not go with them. You don't take candy, toys, anything. You run and find a teacher. Do you understand?" A soft wave of yes filled the room. That evening, our parents got calls. The next morning, everyone gathered in the gym. I remember my mom's hand gripping mine so tightly it almost hurt. From that day forward, Meadowbrook Elementary had a guard stationed by the parking lot. Nobody was allowed near the back fence again. Back then, I thought the whole thing was because of my silly prank. But as I grew older, the truth sank in. Damon had been seconds away from stepping into that car, from disappearing forever. And the thought that chills me now as a father is how easily it could have been me, all because of a pack of colored markers. People need to understand what really happened to me last summer out in the Pine Hollow Reserve. I'm 32, work as an electrician in Milford, and have been hiking solo for about 8 years now. That Saturday in late June started off like any other weekend adventure. I left early, parked at a lesser-known trailhead about 40 miles from town, and planned a 15-mile loop through backcountry areas that rarely see another soul. The heat was already thick by 9 in the morning, humid enough to glue my shirt to my skin within minutes. I carried my usual gear, a light pack, 2 liters of water, some jerky and trail mix, my GPS, and a small fixed-blade knife strapped to my belt. The first few miles passed peacefully, just the droning of cicadas in the trees, the occasional rustle of small animals, and the crunch of my boots over the dry pine needles carpeting the ground. Around noon, I decided to leave the marked trail to check out a creek I could hear trickling somewhere below the ridge. That's when everything took a turn I'll never forget. After about 20 minutes of pushing through thick underbrush and thorny vines, ducking under spider webs and fighting the slope, I burst through a dense wall of mountain laurel and stumbled right into what appeared to be someone's camp. But this wasn't any backpacker's setup. No neat tents or careful leave-no-trace organization. There were 6 or 7 makeshift shelters strung together from blue tarps and rope tied between trees, a fire pit still glowing with hot coals, and a mess of belongings scattered around, clothes hanging on lines, crushed cans and trash littering the dirt. Empty bean tins, cigarette packs, and dozens of cheap liquor bottles, mostly whiskey and vodka, were tossed carelessly about, as though the people here just drank and threw things where they landed. Then the smell hit me. It was overwhelming. Filthy bodies, rotting food, and something chemical beneath it all, sharp enough to sting my nose. Leaning against a thick oak were several guns, 4 rifles, maybe 2 shotguns, and multiple boxes of ammunition sitting on a makeshift plywood table. The sight froze me in place. My first thought was to back away slowly, get out before whoever lived here came back. These weren't just vagrants down on their luck. The weapons alone made that clear. I stepped back carefully, trying not to make a sound when movement flickered in my peripheral vision. About 30 feet to my left, half hidden behind a pine trunk, someone was standing perfectly still watching me. It was a woman, maybe mid-40s, wearing a stained yellow tank top and cut-off jeans, her hair hanging in greasy strands around her face. She didn't say a word, she didn't move, just stood there staring at me with this blank, unsettling expression that made every hair on my arms lift. I raised a hand, forcing a small, awkward smile. "Sorry," I said, trying to sound casual. "Didn't mean to wander in, just got a little lost looking for the creek." She didn't respond, not a blink, not a sound. Then I caught more movement, this time to my right, behind me, everywhere. They were all around the perimeter of the camp. I counted at least 8 figures, maybe more, men and women of different ages, all dressed in tattered, filthy clothes, all wearing the same hollow stare. None spoke, none advanced, but their spacing was deliberate, like they were cutting off every possible way out. The nearest one to me, a thin guy in his 20s with a patchy beard and a faded baseball cap, stood near a makeshift table built from an old door balanced on cinder blocks. On top of it were several plastic bags filled with something white, a small digital scale, and a row of burner phones. In an instant, the chemical stench made sense. My throat went dry. This wasn't a camp of drifters. They were cooking something out here, and I had just walked straight into the middle of it. The silence stretched so long it warped time. Maybe half a minute, but it felt eternal. No one moved. No one spoke. I stood there drenched in sweat, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then from behind one of the larger tarp shelters, an older man appeared. He looked different, cleaner. His clothes were new, a gray button-up shirt tucked into dark jeans, polished leather boots instead of the worn sneakers everyone else had. His silver hair was pulled back neatly in a ponytail, and he walked with a calm confidence that instantly marked him as the one in charge. He approached until he stood 10 feet away, smiling pleasantly. His teeth were perfect and white, a jarring contrast to the other's decayed grins. "You're pretty far off the trail, friend," he said, his tone smooth and oddly polite, like we were two strangers chatting in a cafe rather than in the middle of nowhere surrounded by armed strangers. "GPS can be tricky out here. Sometimes it sends folks right off course." I tried to steady my voice, explaining that I'd followed what I thought was a deer path down toward the creek and must have lost my bearings. He nodded, still smiling, then started asking where I'd parked, how long I'd been out, whether anyone knew I was here. Each question sounded casual, but the intent beneath them was razor sharp. He was gauging whether I was alone, whether someone would come looking for me. I lied, saying my girlfriend expected me back by 5 and had my coordinates through a safety app that she'd already texted twice for updates. His smile faded slightly as he pulled an old flip phone from his pocket and glanced at the screen. "No signal out here," he said evenly. "Hasn't been for years. Companies stopped maintaining towers in this stretch." A chill went through me, because he was right. I hadn't had service since 2 miles from the trailhead. He took a step forward and instinct made me back away. He chuckled softly. "Easy," he said. "No one here's looking for trouble. We're just folks who prefer to live free from all that government noise and oversight. I'm sure you get it. Some people just want their space." Behind him, 2 more figures stepped out of the tents, both holding hunting rifles pointed downward. One, a large man with a fiery red beard and a scar running from ear to jaw, went to the table with the white powder, calmly packing it into a black duffel bag, his eyes never leaving me. The silver-haired man's tone stayed warm, but carried an unmistakable edge. "Thing is, you've seen our little community here. That puts us in a bit of a bind. We prize our privacy, you understand. So we'll need to decide how to handle this." The woman in the yellow tank top drifted closer. She was maybe 8 feet away now, and I could see her arms covered in sores and scratches, some healing, some raw. Her pupils were so wide her eyes looked nearly black. She kept scraping her neck with dirty nails, muttering something too low to hear. The man noticed my gaze and smiled faintly. "Don't worry about June," he said. "She's been through some hard times, but we take care of our own." He gestured around the camp proudly. "Everyone here has their reasons. Some were pushed out, some walked away, but we've built something real here, a family. We share what we have, look after one another, and protect what's ours." He rested a hand on his hip, shifting his shirt enough for me to see the grip of a pistol tucked at his waist. "And we're very good at protecting what's ours." I knew bolting would be suicide. They were armed, knew the terrain, and had me boxed in. So I tried to stay calm, pretending to understand their situation. I told the man I completely got it, that I was just a hiker who'd wandered too far, not someone interested in anyone's business. I even made up a story about my brother living out of an RV and getting hassled by the cops, hoping to sound like the kind of person who sympathized with people wanting to live off-grid. The leader listened quietly, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he tilted his head, glanced around at the others, and some kind of silent exchange passed between them. Subtle nods, small gestures I couldn't decode. When he turned back to me, his tone was steady, almost gentle. "All right," he said. "Here's what we'll do. You're going to take a little walk with me and my associate here." He motioned to the red-bearded man, who just zipped the duffel bag shut. "We'll see you back to the main trail," the leader continued, "and from there you'll forget about all this. Forget the faces, forget what you saw, forget every word we've shared, because if you don't—" He paused. The red-bearded man standing behind him dragged a finger across his throat in a slow, deliberate motion that said more than words ever could. "They made me empty my pockets first. My phone, my GPS, my small camera, all taken." The leader scrolled through the photos on my phone while the red-bearded man checked the GPS logs to make sure I hadn't marked anything near their camp. "Clean," the big man muttered, handing it back. "They returned everything except the GPS." "That stays," the leader said. "Consider it a small tuition fee for the lesson you got today." Then we started walking. The silver-haired man took the lead. I followed in the middle, and the red-bearded one trailed close behind, rifle cradled in his arms. The rest of the camp remained where they were, but I could still feel their stares cutting through the trees as we left. We hiked in silence for what felt like forever, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. There was no clear trail, just thick forest and uneven ground. The leader moved with absolute confidence, no hesitation, no checking bearings, like he knew every inch of this place by heart. Behind me, I heard the red-bearded man's heavy breaths and the occasional grunt when branches snagged his jacket. Finally, the leader stopped at what he called the main path. To me, it looked like any other faint line through the trees, barely visible except for a few patches of compacted dirt. He turned toward me and pointed north. "Your truck's that way," he said. "About 3 miles. If you move quick, you'll be there in about an hour." He took a step closer, close enough for me to smell the mix of coffee and cigarettes on his breath. His voice lowered. "Let's be clear about something," he said. "We know your name from your license. We know you're from Milford. We know what kind of truck you drive. So if anything comes of this, if we see cops, rangers, anyone snooping around, we'll know who to thank." His tone stayed calm, conversational, which somehow made it even worse. "We've got friends in town," he added. "People who can find anyone, anywhere. This forest is our home, and we don't take kindly to threats against it." The red-bearded man spoke up next, his grin humorless. "Saw your parking pass too," he said. "Nice blue Ford pickup, Arkansas plates ending in 472. Shame if something were to happen to it one night." The casual way he said it hit harder than if he'd shouted. The leader smiled one more time, that same polite, unnerving expression, and said, "You seem like a smart guy. Smart men know when to keep quiet. Don't make us regret showing mercy today." Then, without another word, they turned and melted back into the forest. They moved so smoothly, so silently, that even though I kept my eyes fixed on them, within seconds they were gone, swallowed by the trees as if they'd never been there at all. For nearly a minute, I just stood there, listening to the forest, waiting to be sure they weren't coming back. When I finally started moving, I kept my pace steady but fast, fighting the urge to run. Every shadow between the trees felt like a figure watching me. The next 3 miles stretched endlessly, each sound magnified: the wind, the crackle of leaves, the faint echo of my own breathing. When I finally caught sight of my truck through the branches, untouched, parked alone in the gravel lot, I felt a wave of relief so intense I nearly fell to my knees. I climbed in, locked the doors, and drove. No stops, no brakes, no gas, no food. I just kept going, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt, white-knuckled all the way back to Milford. I didn't stop driving until I pulled into my own driveway. Didn't even glance at a gas station or store along the way. I just wanted pavement, streetlights, and the sight of other cars again. When I finally turned off the ignition, I sat there in silence, realizing how close I'd come to never making it back. And you know what? I never reported it. Not to the police, not to the forest rangers, not even to a friend. I told no one, not a single soul. It's been 4 months since that day, and I still find myself checking my mirrors constantly, scanning faces and passing cars, jumping at sudden sounds. I still catch myself freezing when I see a flash of blue tarp in someone's yard, or catch that same chemical smell that burned my nose out there. I know those people are still out there, somewhere in the depths of Pine Hollow Reserve, cooking their poison and calling it freedom. I know they meant every word they said. Those weren't the ramblings of drugged-out drifters. They were deliberate threats, cold and serious. Sometimes silence isn't cowardice. Sometimes it's survival. There's a difference between being brave and being smart enough to recognize when you're completely outmatched, and I was. Every time I think back to that clearing, the way they appeared from between the trees without a sound, the calmness in that man's voice, the confidence in his eyes, I realize that if I'd said the wrong thing, made one sudden move, I wouldn't have walked out of those woods. The forest hasn't felt the same to me since. The peace I used to find in those quiet trails has been replaced by a kind of watchful dread. Every rustle feels like someone breathing nearby. Every patch of shadow looks too still, too aware. I used to think I understood wilderness, that nature was wild but neutral. But what I found out there in Pine Hollow wasn't nature. It was something else, organized, hidden, dangerous. So, no, I haven't gone back. Not to that trailhead, not to any part of that forest. I hike closer to town now, where the sound of traffic still hums faintly through the trees, where you can see the glow of a streetlight if you look long enough through the leaves. I used to think solitude was safety, that being alone out there meant peace. Now I know better. There are people who disappear in those woods, and I used to think maybe they got lost, maybe an accident happened. But now when I read about someone missing near Pine Hollow, I can't help but wonder if they just wandered too far like I did, only they didn't make it out. Last autumn, I was 24 and working at a sporting goods store in Eugene, Oregon, spending nearly every weekend trekking through forest trails with my coworkers. We were all seasoned hikers, the kind of people who'd pick sunrise over sleep just to get an early start on the trail. On one October morning, it started out like any other trip. My coworker Eli, his boyfriend Marcus, and our friend Renee decided we'd check out a lesser-known network of trails about 2 hours southeast of town. The weather was perfect. Crisp air, the scent of pine, and the kind of golden light that made the whole forest shimmer. We packed for an 8-mile loop, expecting to see remote backcountry views and maybe a few deer if we were lucky. I remember teasing Renee that the wildest thing we'd probably encounter would be a squirrel with attitude. We couldn't have imagined that within a few hours that easygoing day would twist into something that still makes me glance at my rearview mirror whenever I drive through wooded backroads. Roughly 3 miles in, Eli pointed out what looked like an old service road cutting away from the main trail, almost swallowed by thick brush and layers of fallen leaves. We weren't on a schedule, the daylight was still high, and Eli was convinced it might lead to some abandoned cabin or ranger outpost. Oregon's full of relics from the logging days, so it didn't seem unusual. The route was overgrown, every few steps a tangle of brambles snagging our pants, branches hanging low enough that we had to duck constantly. After maybe 15 minutes of fighting through that mess, the trees suddenly parted into a clearing where light cut through in dusty rays. And right in the middle of it sat a weathered white van partly hidden by waist-high grass, surrounded by rusted cans and what looked like an old campfire circle. The vehicle had probably been there for months, its tires flat, windows opaque with grime and pine needles, patches of rust creeping along the sides. But the part that drew our eyes was the rear doors, slightly ajar, just enough to make you wonder why. Marcus muttered something about stumbling on a serial killer's hangout, and we all half laughed, uneasy but curious. Renee hung back while Eli, Marcus, and I approached. Our boots crunched over broken glass and leaves, the forest eerily silent around us. The smell hit us before we reached the van, a thick, damp odor of moldy upholstery mixed with something sharp and metallic. Eli used a stick to nudge the door open, the hinges letting out a shriek that made us all flinch. The sight inside forced all of us back a step. The floor was littered with women's belongings, purses, shoes, bits of jewelry, and old cell phones, all mismatched like they came from different people. But what froze me were the steel restraints bolted to the inner walls, heavy-duty cuffs attached to thick chains. Stains darkened the floor beneath them, the kind that made you not want to ask what they were. Renee whispered that we needed to call the police, but no one's phone had signal this deep in the mountains. Marcus was already retreating, saying we should get back to the main trail and find help. That's when we heard it, the sound of branches snapping behind us. It wasn't the light scurry of an animal, it was deliberate, heavy footsteps, coming from the direction we'd entered. The 4 of us went dead still, even the breeze seemed to stop. The steps drew closer, slow and certain, cutting off our path back to the trail. Eli bent to grab a rock, Marcus pulled out a folding knife, and I picked up a sturdy branch, though I knew none of it would mean much if things went bad. Renee still had her phone raised, filming even though we couldn't call anyone, her hands shaking so badly the camera trembled. The footsteps halted maybe 30 feet away, hidden by a screen of pine and thicket. Then came whistling, a slow, tuneful sound like someone strolling without a care in the world. A man's voice followed, casual and friendly. "Hey there, didn't expect to see anybody out here. You folks lost?" The normality of it made my pulse spike. Eli's eyes flicked toward a narrow slope to our right, a game trail heading uphill. If we had to run, that was it. The whistling resumed, closer now, until he appeared through the brush. A man in his 50s, jeans faded, flannel shirt tucked into a belt, the picture of an ordinary outdoorsman. He smiled, lines crinkling around his eyes, carrying a fishing rod and a small backpack. But I noticed his boots right away, caked in fresh mud, though the ground here was dry and dusty, no rain in weeks. He glanced at the van, and for just a flicker his expression shifted. Gone was the friendly air, replaced by something colder before that pleasant mask slid back on. "Ah, you found my old project," he said, stepping between us and both exits, the overgrown road and the deer path. "Bought that thing years ago, figured I'd turn it into a camper, never got around to it." His words came out too smooth, too prepared, like he'd said them before. Marcus, trying to keep things light, joked that we were just exploring and should probably head back. The man's grin widened, but his eyes didn't move with it. "Where'd you park?" he asked softly. "I could show you a shortcut." He leaned the fishing rod against a tree, and I saw his right hand stay tucked in his jacket pocket, gripping something out of sight. Renee's phone was still recording, the lens catching a faint tremor. He noticed, "That's a nice phone," he said, tone flat now. "Does it even work out here?" It wasn't really a question. That's when Eli saved us. He suddenly hunched over, pretending to gag, muttering that he'd eaten something bad that morning. It caught the man off guard. He stepped back, hand leaving his pocket, empty, his face twisting in disgust. In that split second, Marcus shouted, "Run!" and grabbed Renee's wrist. Chaos erupted. Marcus and Renee sprinted up the deer path. Eli tore into the thick trees to the left, and I bolted toward the van, veering hard right. Behind me, the man shouted, his voice stripped of any friendliness now, replaced by raw fury. Footsteps thundered after someone, maybe Eli, maybe me. I didn't know. I crashed through branches, my arms and face scratched, leaping over deadfall, barely keeping my footing on the rocky slope. More shouts echoed through the woods, multiple voices, which meant at least some of us were still alive and moving. After what felt endless but was probably 10 minutes, I stumbled onto another abandoned logging road, wider and clearer than the first. My lungs burned and my legs trembled, but I didn't dare stop. Then I heard Marcus calling from somewhere to my left. Following his voice, I found him and Renee crouched behind a massive fallen trunk, both scraped up and panting. Renee's cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears, but her phone was still in her hand. We crouched there in silence for several minutes, listening for footsteps. Eventually, Eli burst through from the opposite direction, his sleeve ripped, blood streaking his forearm where he'd cut himself on something sharp. He'd lost the man by doubling back through a creek bed. We didn't stop to talk. We just started moving again, staying tight together, following that logging road until it met a gravel service route marked by faded forestry signs. 2 more exhausting hours later, we reached the parking lot where Marcus's truck sat exactly where we'd left it. The moment our phones picked up a signal, Renee called 911 while Marcus started the engine, ready to bolt if we had to. The dispatcher kept us on the line, gathering every detail, location, vehicle description, the man's appearance. Within 20 minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived to take statements and sent more units toward the area. Renee showed them her video. It caught the inside of the van perfectly. The restraints, the scattered belongings, and a brief 10-second clip of the man before she lowered her phone. One deputy, an older woman with streaks of gray in her hair, watched the footage, then immediately got on her radio requesting backup and mentioning something about connecting cases. The phrase chilled me. She wouldn't say which cases, only that detectives would meet us at the station. We spent nearly 4 hours there, each in separate rooms, recounting every moment to different investigators. They showed us photo lineups, but the man's face wasn't among them. A detective named Carver eventually told us that 3 women had gone missing from trails within 50 miles over the last year and a half, all experienced hikers who'd vanished without a trace. The items we'd seen matched those on the missing persons list. When we were finally released after midnight, they warned us not to share specifics publicly while the investigation remained open. Days later, they located the clearing, but the van was gone. Only tire marks and bits of trash remained. Somehow, after we escaped, he'd returned, calm enough to drive that vehicle out of there. 2 weeks later, the van turned up torched in a ravine nearly 50 miles away, completely destroyed. The man was never identified, and the missing hikers were never found. What unsettled me most was how ordinary he'd looked. Someone you'd pass at a gas station, a neighbor waving from across the street, a friendly face on a trail. Eli quit his job and moved to Nevada. Marcus and Renee broke up soon after. She told me she couldn't see him without flashing back to that day. We all handled it differently, but we never hiked together again. I still live in Oregon, still work at the same shop, but I haven't set foot on a trail since. When customers ask about hikes near that region, I steer them somewhere else. The police asked us not to post details online, and I've respected that, changing small parts here to protect the case. But last month, Detective Carver called again. Another hiker missing, same pattern, same kind of area. Her car was still at the trailhead, untouched. He asked me to review some new photos, maybe help a sketch artist. I agreed, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. He's still out there, maybe in another van now, maybe another state, still whistling that same casual tune as he hunts. If you ever find something in the woods that feels wrong, please don't let curiosity win. Just leave. Run until you see daylight. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, and some predators wear the faces of ordinary men. The weekend began like every other hiking getaway I'd taken with my college friends. It was early May of 2018, just after finals at Pacific State University, and the 4 of us, myself, Ryan, Mark, and Alex, agreed we needed to unwind in the wilderness. I was 22 back then, finishing my degree in environmental studies while working part-time at an outdoor gear shop. We'd found a rustic cabin near Mount Rainier through a sketchy rental site that Alex discovered, mostly because it was ridiculously cheap, yet had a few decent reviews. The place stood about 3 miles from the nearest trailhead, surrounded by endless pine trees and the occasional animal path. It felt like the perfect escape. No reception, no Wi-Fi, just the 4 of us, our bags filled with beer, snacks, and a deck of cards. The first day was exactly what we wanted. We hiked 8 miles along the Cascade Ridge Trail, snapped pictures at every viewpoint, and returned to the cabin around sundown, worn out but content. The cabin itself was much smaller than the photos had suggested. A single main room with 2 bunk beds, an ancient kitchenette straight out of the 1970s, and a bathroom where you had to jiggle the handle to stop the water from running. Still, compared to our usual tent camping, having a roof and 4 walls felt like luxury. We cooked burgers on a rusty propane stove, played poker with pretzels as chips, and listened to Mark retell the same breakup story he'd been milking since sophomore year. By 11, we were all wiped out, legs sore, stomachs full of cheap beer and greasy food. Sometime around midnight, I woke needing to pee, cursing the last beer I'd chugged. The cabin was swallowed in darkness except for the faint green glow from Alex's smartwatch on the nightstand. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight, careful not to step on any gear scattered across the floor. That's when I heard it, footsteps on the porch outside. Not the quick scurry of a raccoon or the light step of a deer, but heavy, deliberate pacing. Someone was circling the cabin. My breath caught as the sound moved from the front porch toward the side where our window faced the woods. The steps came 3 or 4 at a time, pausing, then continuing, the wood creaking under the person's weight. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be discreet. Mark stirred on the lower bunk across from me, eyes wide as he mouthed, "What's going on?" I shrugged, though every nerve in me was on edge. The sound traveled around the entire cabin, stopping at each window as if whoever it was inspecting the place. I crept toward the front window and gently pulled the curtain back an inch. Under the moonlight, I could make out a figure, a tall man wearing dark clothing, standing about 10 feet away, motionless, just staring. His arms hung at his sides. After half a minute, he turned and vanished into the trees. We woke Ryan and Alex, whispering what we'd seen. Alex, the skeptic, insisted it was probably a lost hiker or maybe the property owner checking in. But Ryan said what we were all thinking: who the hell checks on a rental cabin at midnight by walking circles around it? We dragged the heavy dresser in front of the door, the screech of wood on wood echoing through the stillness. Alex grabbed a cast iron pan from the kitchen. Mark took a trekking pole, and Ryan clutched his pocket knife like a weapon. I had my phone ready to dial 911, though we all knew there was no signal. We huddled together in the dark, every sound amplified, the wind brushing against the roof, branches scraping the walls, pine cones falling from above. An hour passed with nothing but our ragged breathing. The tension began to ease. We even joked nervously that we'd probably scared ourselves over some drunk local. Alex suggested moving the dresser back. Then the doorknob turned. Not fast but slow, methodical, like someone testing if it was locked. It twisted twice and stopped. The footsteps returned, heavier this time, circling toward the uncovered side window. That's when a face pressed against the glass, hands cupped around the eyes trying to peer in. The man looked about 40, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low. His forehead touched the glass as he scanned the room, and even though we stayed completely still, it felt like his gaze locked right on us. Then he disappeared again. Silence followed, thick and unbearable. We could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the rustle of Ryan's grip tightening on his knife. Then came the screech of metal from the rear wall. Mark whispered that a small shed was attached back there, storing maintenance tools. We heard rummaging, objects clattering, and then the footsteps returned to the front. A heavy thud struck the door, then another, metal hitting wood. He was trying to break in, using something heavy like a crowbar or hammer. The old frame cracked with each blow, splinters falling to the floor. Alex shouted, "We called the cops. They're coming." A lie, but worth a shot. The pounding stopped, and then a voice came through the wood, rough and slurred. "Ain't no cops coming here, boys. Just want to talk." The way he said boys made my skin crawl. He knew exactly who we were. 4 young men alone in the woods. Ryan began recording on his phone while Mark grabbed the fire extinguisher from near the stove. The pounding grew harder. The wood began to split along the bolt line. Then the door frame shattered. The door swung inward and slammed against the dresser, leaving an 8-inch gap where a filthy arm reached through, grasping at nothing. Mark blasted the extinguisher through the gap, filling the air with a storm of white powder. The man screamed and stumbled back off the porch, coughing violently. We seized the moment. Alex and I shoved our weight against the dresser while Ryan dug through his backpack, pulling out a camping hatchet, a coil of rope, and the can of bear spray he'd insisted on bringing, despite our teasing. The man returned, furious now, wiping his face with his sleeve. He kicked at the door, pushing the dresser back inch by inch. Through the gap, his crazed eyes gleamed. He wore a flannel shirt with reflective stripes like a construction worker's. He jammed the crowbar into the crack and began prying with all his strength. Mark hit him again with the extinguisher, but it sputtered weakly. That's when Ryan lunged forward, shoving his arm through the opening and unleashing the bear spray directly into the man's face. His scream tore through the night, raw and guttural. He stumbled backward off the porch, clutching his eyes. We used the seconds he gave us to fortify the entrance. Alex and I flipped the kitchen table, wedging it against the dresser. Mark dragged the bunk mattresses to block the windows, and Ryan stood by the door with the hatchet raised. Outside, we heard the man thrashing and yelling incoherently. Then faintly, we heard sirens in the distance. Somehow, Alex's phone had managed to send an SOS signal through a satellite connection when he tried calling 911 earlier. The sound grew closer. Flashes of red and blue filtered through the trees. The man heard them too. His footsteps retreated into the forest. By the time 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, sweeping the area with flashlights and guns drawn, he was gone. They took our statements, inspected the door, and radioed for backup to search the woods. One of them, Officer Delgado, recognized our description immediately. The man's name was Henry Dorsey, a former logger fired months earlier, now living wild in the forest. He'd been seen stalking hikers, following people from trailheads, and breaking into vacant cabins. They'd been searching for him for weeks. He was found 2 hours later hiding in a drainage culvert, still half blind from the bear spray. We spent the rest of the night at the sheriff's office, sipping bitter coffee and recounting everything. They told us Henry had a long history of addiction and untreated mental illness, and losing his job had sent him spiraling. He'd been watching hiking groups for months, but we were the first he'd actually tried to attack. The detective said we'd done everything right, stayed together, fought back, and most importantly, kept him from getting inside. When we finally drove home that morning, none of us said a word. I haven't gone camping since. I have to share this because the park rangers, the police, no one will speak about what happened to my brother Daniel last September. I teach high school biology in Montana and have been doing so for 7 years. In my family, I've always been the practical one. Daniel was 29, a physical therapist at a clinic downtown, and every weekend he hiked alone to clear his head after long work weeks. He'd kept up this ritual for 3 years, always sending me pictures, awful selfies with that crooked grin, animals in the distance, or some jagged horizon behind him. That particular Saturday in September started no differently, except this time he went to Frostfall National Park, hiking the Ridgeview Trail, because he'd heard the bighorn sheep were especially active that season. The last text I ever got from him was at 8:47 a.m., a photo of the trailhead sign with a caption, "Heading out, back by 4." He was wearing his bright orange jacket, the one Mom got him so hunters could see him clearly, even though hunting wasn't allowed there. I joked the night before that he looked like a traffic cone, and he laughed, saying at least search and rescue could spot him if he rolled an ankle. The Ridgeview Trail was one of the park's busiest routes, especially on a crisp fall Saturday. Weather was perfect, mid-60s, no clouds, and rangers later said about 40 people had started that same hike within an hour of Daniel. The parking lot had been nearly full, and several hikers remembered him vividly because of that orange jacket stretching near his blue Tacoma, adjusting his backpack straps, going through his usual pre-hike motions. Around 2 in the afternoon, I felt this strange unease, like realizing too late you've made a huge mistake. I tried calling Daniel, something I never did during his hikes, but it went straight to voicemail. I figured he was in a dead zone. It's common in the mountains. I left a joking message telling him not to forget my huckleberry bar from the gift shop. But by 5, when no text came saying he was back at his truck, concern began to settle in. Daniel was always meticulous about checking in. Ever since that one scare 3 years earlier, he never missed it again. By 6, I was already on the phone with the Park Service, trying not to sound panicked while explaining this wasn't normal for him. He was cautious, experienced, predictable. That evening, rangers started a light search. Just a few driving the roads, checking parking areas. His truck was still there, locked, his wallet tucked under the passenger seat as usual. They thought he might have sprained something and was just making his way back slowly. But then a couple, the Petersons from Minnesota, came forward with something odd. They'd seen him around 1:30 p.m., about 3 miles in, standing beside a massive pine tree. Mrs. Peterson remembered because Daniel had helped them take a photo earlier at an overlook, and she'd commented on his jacket, saying her grandson had the same one. When they passed again, he was standing by that tree, pack on the ground, staring into the branches, as if watching something move. Mr. Peterson asked if he was okay, and Daniel turned, gave them this enormous smile and said, "Perfect, actually, have a great hike." It struck them as strange. He'd stopped in such a plain spot, not a viewpoint, not a clearing, but they figured he'd seen a bird. Daniel's backpack wasn't dropped, it was propped neatly against the trunk, zippers closed. Inside, his phone, battery at 47%, full signal, both water bottles filled, his lunch untouched, his emergency whistle still clipped. But his hiking boots were inside the pack, clean, undamaged, socks tucked in neatly. The soil was damp from rain 2 days earlier, yet not a single footprint surrounded the spot. No bare tracks, no broken plants, nothing. Tracking experts said the same thing. It was as if Daniel had ceased existing right there. I stayed for 2 weeks, sleeping in my car at the trailhead. Every morning I hiked to that tree, sometimes with search teams, sometimes alone, just staring, trying to make sense of it. People walked past unaware they were crossing what felt like sacred ground. I talked to everyone who'd been on the trail, desperate for another clue. That's when I met an older hiker, Henry Walsh, retired Forest Service, who'd walked those paths for 30 years. He hadn't seen Daniel but froze when I described the location. In 1988, a woman named Laura Dunning disappeared from that very spot. Same details, backpack found intact, shoes inside, no prints, never recovered. Henry said the rangers back then called that stretch the Quiet Mile. Wouldn't explain why, just murmured, "Sometimes the woods decide to keep someone." The search lasted 3 weeks before being scaled back. They brought in cadaver dogs, heat drones, even university experts with ground radar. Nothing. Daniel's phone records showed no calls after my 2 p.m. attempt. GPS placed him at that pine from 1:28 to 1:31. Then data stopped, not disabled, not lost signal, just ended while the phone remained on. The FBI joined briefly, suspecting a staged disappearance, but his accounts, apartment, and passport were untouched. The assigned agent, Coleman, later admitted she'd never seen anything like it. Everything wrong in the most deliberate way. 4 months later, a woman named Julia Hammond contacted me after seeing the story online. She drove from Idaho to meet me at a diner near the park. Her daughter Melissa had gone missing in Yellowstone in 2016. Identical case, backpack pristine, shoes stored, no trail beyond. But Julia told me something different. 3 days before Melissa vanished, she'd called her mother about meeting a hiker who spoke of thin places in the wild, spots where hikers sometimes felt compelled to stop and step through. Melissa had laughed it off, but said he warned her never to remove her shoes if she felt that pull, calling it an invitation. Julia had collected 23 similar disappearances across national parks, every case same pattern. The shoes neatly set aside. The detail that truly chills me came later, when Daniel's coworker Brian found a small notebook cleaning his desk. The final pages weren't patient notes, they were dated journal entries from 2 weeks before the hike. Daniel wrote about strange dreams of a warped forest that mirrored his trails, trees bending at impossible angles, paths that spiraled upward, a constant sense of something walking alongside him, mimicking his steps but never visible. The last entry from the night before he vanished read, "The footsteps are louder tonight. They echo mine, just half a beat behind. I think they're waiting for me to match them." Brian thought he'd been stressed, maybe sleep deprived, but I knew Daniel. He was grounded, logical, not one for imagination. Nearly a year after his disappearance, I returned to that pine for closure. I stood there for hours, tracing the bark, sitting where his pack had been. Just as I turned to leave, I noticed something carved into the trunk, about 7 feet up, half hidden by fresh growth, initials, LD, beneath it, weathered but legible, MH 2016. And above both, still oozing sap, DP 2024, Daniel Pierce. But my brother never carved trees. He despised leaving marks in nature. I photographed it, called the rangers. 2 hours later, when they arrived, the carvings were gone, not scraped, not hidden, gone. The bark smooth and clean. They looked at me with pity, suggesting grief counseling. But I know what I saw. I don't hike anymore. I can't even walk past a trailhead. In dreams, Daniel stands beneath that pine, orange jacket bright against endless green, waving, maybe greeting, maybe farewell. The Petersons reached out recently. Mrs. Peterson said his last smile had seemed different, like he'd just understood something no one else could. The case remains open, but I know they'll never find him. Henry was right. The forest keeps who it wants. All I have now is his orange jacket hanging in my closet, and the quiet belief that wherever he went, my brother found what he was searching for. I just wish I knew whether he meant to. The search dogs went wild when they reached that exact patch of earth, barking, yelping, spinning like they'd struck something unseen. And then silence, total and absolute. 6 separate canine units, all veterans of wilderness recovery, failed at the very same spot to track Ashley Monroe's scent, precisely 40 feet from where her stainless steel water bottle stood upright against a mossy log. I've worked with mountain recovery and rescue for 8 years through floods, avalanches, and countless lost hikers, but nothing I've seen compares to what unfolded in those woods last week. Ashley was my roommate's younger sister, 24, newly graduated from nursing school, about to start her first job at St. Helens Medical. At 11:47 a.m., she sent her mother a cheerful photo from the summit, bright grin, peace sign, and her red hiking boots visible at the bottom edge. By 2 p.m., she had vanished from a trail she knew better than most. The Willard foothills in early August are crowded with day hikers, and the Crescent Lake Loop she picked that Saturday is practically a freeway through the forest, 5 miles round trip, well-marked wooden bridges over every creek, signposts at every fork. When she failed to show up for her 7 p.m. shift, her supervisor contacted her emergency number. Her car, an old Subaru with nursing textbooks visible through the back window, still sat in the lot. Her hiking permit, neatly filled out, listed her expected return time as 4 p.m. Search teams were dispatched within 2 hours of the call. I joined the next morning, assuming we'd find her somewhere close, sprained ankle, embarrassed, relieved. But the second day shifted everything. Around 11 a.m., Frank, an older volunteer with silver hair and worn-out knees, spotted something blue about 300 yards off trail, down a steep slope covered in thorny brush. It was Ashley's insulated water bottle, perfectly upright against a decaying log, ice still half frozen inside after 36 hours outdoors. Her initials, AMC, were etched into the base, and half the water remained. The placement made no sense. You don't carefully prop your bottle if you're hurt or in distress, and you never abandon it without reason. 20 feet away, caught in the low branches of a hemlock like it had been tossed, was her lightweight purple rain jacket. That was when the dogs arrived. 6 teams from 3 counties, including Duke, a legendary bloodhound who'd once found a missing child in a blizzard. They started him at her car, letting him catch the scent from her sleeping bag stored in the trunk, then followed his path up the main trail, 2 miles in, a sharp left onto a barely visible deer path, then downhill straight toward the area where her belongings were discovered. But then came the unexplainable part. Roughly 40 feet from the bottle, every dog froze, not fading out like when rain dilutes a scent. No, they all stopped cold, whined, backed up, refused to move forward. Duke let out this low, grief-heavy howl that made the entire crew fall silent. Diane, the search coordinator with 15 years on the job, ordered us to sweep outward from that point in a grid formation, shoulder to shoulder, combing through the underbrush inch by inch. We checked every hollow, every dip in the soil, every thick bush. The terrain was oddly inconsistent. Not exactly a clearing, but not dense either, with near-perfect circular openings where sunlight broke through the canopy. The ground was blanketed in thick moss that disguised any disturbance, and the soil beneath was damp and dark, nearly black. We found animal prints, deer, raccoon, coyote, but not one human footprint beyond where the dogs had halted. The forensics crew collected soil, took photographs, even ran ground-penetrating radar, but the readings glitched, showing impossible variations in density every few feet. By Wednesday, things went from strange to terrifying. The search area had expanded 2 miles out. I was paired with George, a retired firefighter who muttered about how eerily quiet the forest was. No birds, no insects, just silence. He wasn't wrong. Normally the air there hums with jays and sparrows, but that day it felt muted. While checking a ravine that paralleled the main trail, George grabbed my arm and pointed down. 50 feet below, near a massive cedar root system, was what looked like deliberate digging. Fresh soil, clean edges, the dirt piled neatly aside. We radioed it in, and within minutes, everyone converged. The excavation team treated it like a crime scene. The pit was empty, but not just empty. It measured 6 feet long, 3 wide, 4 deep, corners so clean they looked carved by machine. The walls were compacted smooth, precise. At the bottom were faint patterns, rows of shallow impressions resembling writing or symbols, though no one could decipher them. The smell was chemical, not earthy, sharp metallic, almost like copper mixed with antifreeze. While forensics worked, I spotted something wedged in the root ball. Ashley's phone, cracked screen, 12% battery. It still powered on. The last images weren't from the summit. 17 photos followed, all taken between 1:47 and 1:53 p.m., every one pitch black. The location data placed them within a 100-foot radius of that pit, but at different altitudes, like she'd been moving erratically up and down terrain. Her last text thread was with someone named Paul, not saved in her contacts. 3 days before her hike, he'd sent her GPS coordinates, no words. She replied, confirmed for Saturday. The coordinates? A quarter mile from where the dogs lost her scent. The number traced back to a prepaid phone bought in cash at a Tacoma gas station 2 weeks prior. Activated once, never used again. Surveillance footage showed a man wearing a baseball cap and glasses, average everything, head lowered. Then Friday morning, day 6. A tourist from Ohio, unaffiliated with the search, stumbled into the ranger station trembling. He claimed he'd found a campsite, but wrong. At first, rangers thought he was delirious until they saw his photos. Deep in old-growth forest stood a camouflaged hunting blind, elaborate and layered tarps painted in forest tones, netting disguised with moss and branches, positioned with sightlines to 3 trail intersections. Inside were maps of the area marked with dates beside certain points. Ashley's name wasn't written, but 12 others were, all women between 20 and 30. Some familiar from accidental disappearances over the past 2 years. That discovery changed everything. The FBI arrived within hours, shut down the mountain, and deployed units in unmarked vans with gear that looked military grade. They found 7 blinds total, each filled with maps, notes, and unsettling supplies. Notebooks recording hiker patterns, best times for isolation, physical descriptions, favorite routes. Ashley's details were in the newest log: her red boots, her Saturday hikes, her usual parking spot. Handwriting analysis revealed at least 3 different authors. Also discovered, pre-cut rope, heavy-duty zip ties, and bottles of that same copper-sweet chemical, later identified as a veterinary anesthetic absorbable through skin. But the worst came after. Ashley was never recovered. On day 8, cadaver dogs led teams 5 miles off-trail into a dense, tangled basin hidden beneath a canopy so thick it formed near darkness. Inside, investigators uncovered remains corresponding to 8 of the 12 women, various stages of decay, from 18 months to mere weeks old. Ashley was not among them. The FBI canvassed every hiker from the past month, pulled security footage from every business within 50 miles, and poured through thousands of dashcam hours. 2 men were arrested when their DNA was found on items from the blinds, both small-time offenders, both claiming they'd been paid anonymously via cryptocurrency to maintain sites and log activity, never meeting their employers. They said others handled collections. Investigators confirmed the men had been exchanging notebooks at designated drop points, no cameras, always at night, payment left in coded envelopes. They're charged with conspiracy, but without bodies or direct evidence, the case falters. Ashley's family hired private investigators, chasing false sightings and whispers. Sometimes I drive up to the now barred trailhead, staring through the chain-link fence at the woods where her scent simply ceased to exist. I think of those 17 black images, her desperate attempt to capture something unseen. Someone studied her for weeks, learned her routines, planned her vanishing with precision. And the truth that chills me most is this: whoever orchestrated it all is still out there, watching other trails, writing new names in hidden notebooks. And Ashley Monroe, whether lost, taken, or worse, remains as absent as her scent, beyond that inexplicable point where even trained dogs refuse to go. I can still recall my first night settling into the dorms at Westfield University. It was the middle of August, the air dense with humidity, and the entire campus hummed with that anxious, buzzing energy that only new students seemed to radiate. I'd made the 6-hour drive from my small town in Kansas, my parents' aging Subaru loaded to the brim, suitcases, boxes, a tiny fridge, and a cheap Target desk lamp I convinced myself would make the place feel like my own. My assigned roommate was named Tyler Quinn. The housing office had paired us at random, and all I knew about him came from a small printed card. Hometown, Madison, Wisconsin. Major civil engineering. When I first stepped into room 214A, he was already there, sitting on his bed with headphones in. He didn't glance up right away, just gave a short nod like I'd interrupted something. "Hey man, I'm Alex," I said, dropping my duffel beside the bed. He tugged one headphone out, looked over briefly, and muttered, "Tyler." That was it. No handshake, no smile, no small talk. He turned back to his laptop screen, and I told myself not to take it personally. Everyone reacts differently to change. I figured some get loud, some retreat inward. Maybe he just fell into the latter. During those first few days, we barely exchanged words. He wasn't unfriendly, just distant, like his mind was always somewhere else entirely. The room stayed spotless, his side always in perfect order, not a single sock out of place. He'd leave early in the morning, return late at night, and spend hours motionless at his desk with the blinds drawn. One evening I called my mom. "Yeah, he's quiet," I said, trying to make it sound less unnerving. She laughed softly. Better that than messy or noisy, right? At least he's clean." "Yeah," I said, forcing a chuckle. "That's true. By then, I had my own circle. Some guys from Literature 101 and a girl named Erin from the floor above. We'd hang out in the lounge, play ping pong, trade notes, and gossip about campus rumors. By the time I'd come back to the dorm most nights, Tyler was gone again, probably home for the weekend. It became routine, comfortable even, until that night in late October. That Friday had dragged on forever. Midterms were close, and I'd been buried in the library since morning. When I finally returned to the room around 8, Tyler wasn't there. His bed was perfectly made, laptop shut neatly on the desk. "Probably went home again," I muttered. I tossed my backpack aside, plugged in my headphones, and started gaming. The room was still unnaturally so, only the faint ticking of the radiator filled the silence once the heater kicked in. Near 11, I decided to call it a night. As I took off my headset and turned toward the bed, I caught something, just the slightest flicker of motion near the other side of the room. I froze, staring at the shadowy space beneath Tyler's bed. His mini fridge sat down there along with a few plastic storage bins, but I could have sworn something moved. I blinked hard, leaned forward, then I saw it again. A hand. Human. My breath hitched as I lurched back, eyes wide. Before I could react, a voice drifted from the darkness. "Oh, you saw me." Tyler crawled out slowly, his expression void of emotion. His hoodie was half unzipped, hair matted like he'd been lying there for hours. "Dude," I said, trying to laugh it off, though my voice faltered. "What the hell are you doing under there?" For a brief second, he looked almost embarrassed, then smirked. "Just screwing around, man. Wanted to see if you'd noticed. Been under there 3 hours." He shrugged casually. "Guess I lost track of time." I waited for him to laugh, to elaborate, but he didn't. He brushed off his hoodie, muttered something about brushing his teeth, and left the room like nothing strange had just happened. I sat there for a long while, staring at the empty doorway. When he returned, I pretended to scroll through my phone. He climbed into bed, turned off the lamp, and that was it. For a few weeks after that, things went back to their silent normal. I told myself it was just a stupid prank. I even told Erin about it while we walked to class. "Wait, he hid under your bed," she said, half laughing, half disturbed. "No, his bed," I corrected. "He was under his own bed." She frowned. "That's way creepier." "Yeah," I admitted. "I'm trying not to think about it." About a month later, the tension returned. It was a Wednesday. I remembered because I had a paper due that Friday and I'd stayed up later than usual to finish it. Tyler came in around 10, dropped his backpack, and went straight to the bathroom without acknowledging me. When he came back, I was still typing. He sat on his bed, silent, staring forward at nothing. "You good, man?" I asked after a minute. He blinked like coming out of a daze. "Yeah, just tired." He switched off his lamp and lay down. By midnight, I was half asleep when I heard a faint metallic tapping, soft but sharp like something brushing against metal. The sound came from his side of the room. I lifted my head, but the darkness was thick. It stopped for a moment and I told myself it was nothing. I was drifting again when I suddenly felt that unmistakable sense of being watched. Turning my head toward the faint light from the hallway crack, I froze. Tyler was standing beside my bed. His figure loomed still and silent, his face blank, eyes locked on me. In his hand he held something heavy and dark, a hammer. I jerked back instinctively, tangled in my sheets. "What the hell, Tyler?" He didn't react at first, then slowly lowered the hammer. "Relax," he said flatly. "Just fixing my bed." "In the dark?" I snapped. "You were standing over me, dude." He blinked, confusion flickering over his expression. "You moved. Thought I woke you up." His tone stayed calm. Too calm. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Just go to sleep," I said, forcing the words out. He hesitated, muttered, "Sorry," and climbed back into his bed. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat upright until dawn, jumping at every sound the building made. The next morning, I went straight to student housing and requested a transfer. I didn't tell them the whole story, just said I felt unsafe. They told me it might take a week or two. That night, I locked the door and stayed with a friend across campus. I told Tyler I had a group project keeping me out for a few nights. He only nodded. When the transfer finally went through, I waited until he'd left for class, packed everything I owned and left without a word. I avoided that entire hallway from then on. Months later, I heard from someone in the cafeteria that Tyler had been suspended. Something about an incident in the dorms. No one would say what happened, and I didn't ask, but even now, sometimes when I close my eyes, I see it again. The faint hallway light, his still silhouette beside my bed, the hammer hanging loosely in his hand. And I wonder what might have happened if I hadn't opened my eyes that night. I still recall the morning I stuffed every belonging I had into the back of my dented silver Toyota and left behind the quiet familiarity of my hometown in Kansas. I had just graduated, and after endless applications and interviews, I finally secured my first proper job, a logistics position at a fast-growing company in Columbus, Ohio. It felt like the years of studying and hoping had finally led somewhere. Leaving my parents was harder than I'd expected. They were proud, but my mom cried that last night, clinging to me as she whispered, "Promise you'll call every Sunday, okay?" I nodded. I didn't realize then how much that promise would come to mean. The company offered relocation assistance for new hires, which helped since housing in the city was pricey. They worked with several apartment complexes that rented to employees. So, when HR asked if I'd consider sharing a 2-bedroom with another recent hire, I agreed without hesitation. It seemed like a good way to start fresh. That's how I met Ryan Hale. Ryan was from Washington, tall and lean with pale brown hair and an expensive-looking wardrobe. He carried himself with a strange sort of arrogance disguised as charm. We met during orientation week, and at first he seemed harmless, talkative, confident, always eager to share how he'd nailed his college internships and how he planned to optimize workflow systems once he got settled in. He spoke in buzzwords and corporate catchphrases that made supervisors light up, but you could see other employees roll their eyes when he wasn't looking. I stayed neutral. I just wanted to do my work and keep to myself. Our apartment was newly built, modern, quiet, with sleek gray floors and a minimalist kitchen that looked straight out of a design magazine. My room was on the right, Ryan's on the left, and we shared a small balcony overlooking the parking lot. Everything seemed fine those first few weeks. We were both adjusting to the job, and since we worked in the same department, we saw each other all day anyway. He liked the spotlight. I preferred the background. The first unsettling moment came one Friday night, about 3 weeks in. Ryan asked if I wanted to grab drinks with a group from work. I told him I was exhausted and needed to finish a few projects. He smirked and said, "You'll never climb the ladder staying home alone." I forced a laugh, but the way he said it carried a trace of mockery, like he saw me as a loser. Around 2 a.m. I heard him stumble in drunk, muttering to himself as something clattered onto the floor. I almost got up to check, but then I heard him mumble, "Guy thinks he's better than me, idiot." I froze, unsure if I'd heard right. Maybe he wasn't even talking about me, I thought. I tried to dismiss it, but after that, little things began to feel off. My toothbrush would be slightly out of place. My phone charger unplugged in the morning even though I'd left it in overnight. One morning, I found the mug my sister gave me smashed in the sink. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. "You probably dropped it and forgot." His tone was too casual, too smug. Then one morning, my phone alarm didn't go off. When I checked, my phone was dead, unplugged halfway from the wall. I was obsessive about charging it before bed. I barely made it to work on time, sweating through my shirt. That evening, I asked him, "Hey, did you unplug my phone last night?" He looked up, spoon halfway to his mouth, and grinned. "Why would I do that?" I hesitated. "Maybe it got bumped or something." He smirked again. "Sounds like a you problem." The way he said it made my skin crawl. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I'd come home to find the air conditioner blasting in winter or lights left on in empty rooms. One afternoon, I came back early and caught him inside my bedroom. He jumped, startled, and muttered, "Just checking if you borrowed my notebook." When I told him to stay out, he grinned like he enjoyed my irritation. A few nights later, I woke around 3 a.m. and saw a faint flickering glow under my door, the kind that comes from a television. I opened it quietly, only to see Ryan standing motionless near the kitchen counter, facing my direction. He wasn't watching TV. He wasn't moving at all. After a few seconds, he whispered, "Couldn't sleep. Don't freak out," then walked away. I didn't sleep much after that. The next day, he was all smiles at work, cracking jokes and chatting like nothing happened. I started wondering if stress was getting to me. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. But then came the morning that ended all doubt. My desk was covered in chaos. Files scattered, papers ripped, folders overturned. I yelled, and Ryan came out of his room smirking. "What? Ghosts make a mess in there?" I snapped. "Were you in my room again?" He laughed. "Man, relax. You're losing it." When I told him to stop touching my things, he muttered, "Maybe lock your door next time, genius." Problem was, the bedroom doors didn't have locks, only the bathroom did. After that, I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, my work files hidden beneath the bed, and a chair wedged against the door. For a few nights, things were quiet. Then one night around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint creak of floorboards. I stayed still, eyes half open. In the dim light from the window, I saw him crouched near my desk, wearing a hoodie. My pulse thundered as I reached over and turned on my lamp. "Ryan, what the hell are you doing?" He froze, then sprinted out of the room. I chased him down the hall, shouting. He slammed his door shut. "Open the door! I saw you!" No answer. "You're losing your mind," he finally yelled back. My hands shook from the rush of adrenaline. That's when I knew I had to get out. But breaking the lease required both tenants' consent or a huge penalty. Over the next few days, the apartment became unbearably tense. He avoided me at work, sat across the cafeteria, never spoke, but I could feel him watching. Then suddenly, one morning, he didn't show up. By lunch, everyone knew he'd been fired. Apparently, a coworker reported him for sending disturbing messages. HR called it harassment. That night, I came home feeling weightless with relief. Finally, it was over. But when I opened the door, the relief vanished. The apartment looked ransacked, couch cushions torn apart, TV screen cracked, drawers emptied, clothes shredded. My laptop gone. My room looked like it had been hit by a hurricane. I called the apartment manager immediately, filed a police report, and sent photos of everything. The officers said they'd pursue charges since his name was still on the lease. That night, I stayed at a coworker's place. I never slept there again. For weeks after, every creak in my hallway made me flinch. I'd wake to phantom sounds, soft footsteps, faint clicks of doors. The police never recovered my laptop, and Ryan never came back. A neighbor told me later she'd seen him the night before his firing, loading trash bags into his car at 2 a.m. He must have known what was coming and decided to wreck my life on his way out. I still can't explain why his resentment ran so deep. Maybe he saw me as competition. Maybe he was just unhinged. Now every night before bed, I check every door, every lock, and sometimes still wake up certain that someone is standing in the dark, quietly watching me breathe. I wasn't thrilled about moving into the dorms. I can still picture myself standing before that 6-story red brick building on the far side of campus, suitcase in hand, my mom behind me reminding me to double check if I packed my toothbrush. I nodded, pretending confidence I didn't feel. The building looked older than the brochure suggested, its paint flaking, an exit sign flickering above the glass doors, and the faint scent that hit as soon as I stepped inside, a strange blend of bleach, microwaved popcorn, and dust. My name's Layla Warren, and this happened during my freshman year at Ashwood University, a medium-sized college in Illinois. I'd been paired with a random roommate named Kayla. Never seen her, never spoken to her. The school only provided her name and our room assignment, B21. When I got there, her side was already set up. A neatly tucked bed on the left, a suitcase stashed beneath it, a few bits of decor, a string of fairy lights, a printed photo of some foggy lake taped to the wall, and a small candle she wasn't supposed to have. I remember thinking, great, one of those girls will spend all night on FaceTime, but when Kayla finally arrived, she was nothing like I imagined. Tall, frail, with light hair twisted in a careless knot and dark circles framing her eyes. She barely glanced at me as she walked in. "Hey, you must be Layla, right?" "Yeah," I said, smiling awkwardly. "Hey," she dropped her bag on the bed. "Cool, I'll take the left side, that fine?" "Sure," I replied. That was it. No small talk, no questions, no friendly curiosity, just silence. For the next few days, she was almost invisible. She'd vanish before sunrise and return long after midnight. I'd hear the soft click of the door, her quiet steps on the carpet, and the faint creak of the bed as she climbed in, never turning on a light, never saying a word. At first I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was busy or already had her own circle. College worked that way. Some people dove in, others disappeared. But it started feeling strange when I realized nearly 2 weeks had passed without seeing her during the day. Small things began to bother me. The smell. Every night a faint trace of perfume, floral yet sharp, like jasmine laced with smoke. And her phone never stopped buzzing when she wasn't there. Once, I noticed the screen light up again and again. Unknown caller. One Thursday night, it was pouring outside, and I was up finishing an essay. Close to midnight, the doorknob turned softly, the lock clicking. When the door opened, Kayla slipped in, drenched. Her hoodie was soaked through. She looked startled to see me awake. "Oh hey," she said from the doorway. "Hey," I answered. "You okay? It's pouring out." She paused. "Yeah, just went for a walk." "At midnight?" I asked. She gave a half shrug. "I like the rain." Then she climbed into bed, still wearing her wet clothes. By morning, she was gone again. A few days later, all her things disappeared. I came back from class, opened the door, and found her half of the room completely bare. No lights, no picture, no candle, just a dent in the carpet where her bed frame had sat. I texted her, "Hey, did you move out or something?" No answer. Days passed. Then a week. Nothing. I asked the dorm office. Her name was still on the roster, but they said sometimes students take temporary leave. It didn't quite add up, but I didn't question it. Truthfully, I was relieved. I rearranged everything, pushed my bed to the center, added a shelf, hung some posters. For the first time, it felt like my room. Months passed quietly. I barely thought of her again, until April. It was a Sunday night. I'd gone to bed early for a midterm the next morning. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of keys jingling outside my door. Then a soft click. Someone was unlocking it. I froze as the knob turned and the door creaked open. Light spilled in from the hallway, outlining a thin figure carrying bags. I sat up. "Who's there?" I whispered. The door opened wider, and I saw her face. "Kayla?" She looked exactly the same, only paler, eyes hollow. She stepped in like she belonged, dropped a duffel bag on the floor and said sharply, "What the hell happened to the room?" "What?" I asked, confused. "Why's my stuff gone? Where's my bed?" "You left?" I stammered. "You've been gone 6 months." She stared at me blankly. "I was at my boyfriend's," she said flatly. "Okay, but you didn't tell me that," I said. "You never texted back. I thought you moved out." She sighed. "Didn't get your text. My phone broke." Then she peeled off her wet jacket and began unpacking right there clothes, books, a framed photo of her and some guy smiling by a lake. "Kayla? You can't just show up in the middle of the night," I said. She looked at me coldly. "It's my room too, remember?" Something in her tone made my skin crawl. The next morning I went to housing to request a transfer. They said it might take a few days, so I stayed, one last week with her. That's when things began to unravel. She rarely slept. She'd sit up for hours, phone in hand, scrolling through nothing, screen dark. Sometimes I'd wake and see her staring at the wall, unmoving. One night I heard her whispering. I thought she was on the phone until I noticed she wasn't holding one. Her voice was quick, low. "Kayla," I whispered. No answer. I caught fragments. "He's not gone. I saw him. He was at the window." I turned on the lamp. She was sitting cross-legged, eyes wide open, facing the wall. "Kayla, are you okay?" She slowly turned toward me, her face vacant. "Do you ever feel like someone's still here, even when you know they're not?" I didn't reply. I left the room and spent the night downstairs in the lounge. A few days later, she was gone again, but her things remained. Her phone sat on the desk, unlocked. Anxiety got the best of me, and I looked. There were dozens of messages from a contact saved as E, the latest ones unread. "You can't keep ignoring me. You said you saw me again." "He's gone, Kayla. Let him go." The last message had been sent 2 days before she returned. That night, I heard movement under her bed, a faint, dragging sound. I froze. The noise shifted, slow, deliberate, like fabric scraping the floor. I forced myself to look. Nothing there. Just a few boxes, her suitcase, and a faint, sour, metallic odor. When housing finally approved my transfer, I didn't care where I went. 2 weeks later, my new resident advisor mentioned that campus police had collected Kayla's belongings. She never came back. Her ex-boyfriend, the one in the picture, had died in a car crash the week she'd vanished. No one saw her on campus after that night she returned. Sometimes I replay that moment in my head, the door unlocking at 2 a.m., her whispering that eerie question, and I can still see the faint muddy footprints on the carpet leading from the doorway to her bed, none leading back out. Moving into that small apartment on the western edge of the city wasn't something I planned, and I couldn't have predicted how much it would alter my life. When I first signed the lease, I was desperate. I had just relocated to Dayton after finishing college and was barely surviving on a receptionist job at a dental office that didn't even cover my rent. My old place had been nice, but way too expensive, so when I spotted an ad for a 2-bedroom apartment listed at $900 total, I jumped at it immediately. The listing read, "Female roommate wanted clean, easygoing, no drama." That's how I met Tessa. She was about my age, mid-20s, tan skin, platinum blonde hair with black roots showing, a nose ring, and this half-lazy grin that made her look like she never took anything too seriously. She told me she worked the night shift at a gas station on Larkin Avenue. She came off as polite but detached, not unfriendly, just distant. The apartment itself wasn't great. It had a damp smell no air freshener could fix, thin walls, and a flickering kitchen light that buzzed all night. Still, it was a roof over my head. The first couple of weeks passed uneventfully. We exchanged small talk in the kitchen every now and then. She'd complain about rude customers. I'd tell her stories from the clinic. Well, we weren't close, just two people splitting rent. Then things started to look up for me. I got promoted. It wasn't a massive raise, but it was enough to make me start dreaming about having my own place again. I didn't tell Tessa right away. She'd been venting a lot about money problems, about how she hated her job and wanted to quit. I didn't want to sound like I was rubbing my good luck in her face. A few weeks later, she stopped going to work altogether. I didn't notice at first. My hours were long, and she was usually sprawled on the couch watching TV when I got home. One night I asked, "You off today?" She looked up, her hoodie drawn over her head. "Got fired," she muttered. "Really? What happened?" "My boss is a jerk," she said flatly. I told her that sucked and hoped she'd find something soon, but she didn't seem interested in looking. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. She was home constantly, sleeping in late, inviting people over at weird hours, strangers, men I'd never seen before. One of them had a spider tattoo that crept up his neck like it was crawling toward his jaw. I didn't want trouble, so I kept my distance. I locked my door every night and quietly counted the months until the lease ended. Then one Thursday night, everything unraveled. I'd stayed late at work and picked up takeout before heading home. The apartment was empty and silent when I got there. I ate, showered, and was halfway through a Netflix episode when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tessa. "Hey, can you come get me, please?" I frowned. "Me? What's going on? Where are you?" No response. Then my phone rang. "Tessa," I answered. Her voice trembled. "I need you to come get me, please. I'm stuck." "Where are you?" I don't know," she stammered. "Somewhere near Mason Creek Park. My car broke down and I tried walking, but I got lost." "Mason Creek? That's 10 minutes away. How did you end up there?" "I was heading to this new job," she said between soft sobs. "Please, just come. I'm scared." Her crying sounded raw and real. "All right," I said. "Send me your location." She dropped a pin. According to the map, she was deep inside the park near the lake, an area known for being pitch dark after sunset. The only lights were in the parking lot, the rest swallowed by woods. Still, I grabbed my keys and drove out. When I arrived, the lot was empty except for one dim bulb flickering near the far corner. I dialed her. "Okay, I'm here. Where exactly are you?" "Walk down the path a little," she said, her voice faint. "You'll see a trail near the lake. Come that way." "You went into the woods?" "I didn't mean to. Please just come, I'm freezing." I sighed, turned on my phone flashlight, and started walking. "Keep talking, okay?" I said. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, loud in the silence. The light illuminated only trees and narrow trail ahead. "Tessa?" I called out. No answer. I checked my phone. Her location was just a few hundred feet farther. Then I heard rustling in the trees. "Tessa?" I said again. Nothing. Another sound, a branch snapping somewhere off to the side. My pulse raced. I turned slowly, scanning the shadows, and that's when I saw him, a man stepping out from behind a tree about 30 feet away. He wore a dark hoodie, hands buried in his pockets. I froze. Hey, I called out, trying to steady my voice. Have you seen a girl around here? He didn't reply, just started walking toward me. Hey, I'm talking to you, I said, backing away a little. Then another figure appeared on the path behind him, coming from the opposite direction. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. Oh God, I whispered, spinning and running. Footsteps thundered behind me. One of them yelled, "Grab her!" I tore down the trail, branches clawing at my arms, the phone slipping from my hand. My breathing was ragged as I spotted the faint glow of the parking lot ahead. I was close, so close, then someone yanked the back of my jacket. I screamed, twisting hard, and we both hit the ground. I scraped my knee on the gravel. He tried to pin me, but I kicked out as hard as I could, catching his jaw with my boot. He grunted and fell sideways. The second one was still charging. I scrambled up and ran, legs screaming in pain, heart hammering. I burst out of the trail just as headlights appeared down the road. A car was coming. I sprinted toward it, waving frantically. Help, please. The car slowed, honking. The two men stopped at the edge of the lot, half hidden by the trees. The driver's window slid down, was a woman in her 40s. Are you okay? She shouted. Call the police, I screamed. They're after me. She glanced past me, her face going pale. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, yelling the details while keeping my eyes fixed on the woods. The woman stayed inside her car, whispering something I couldn't hear. I saw movement in the darkness again, then silence. 10 minutes later, blue lights flashed across the lot. Relief washed over me so sharply I nearly collapsed. The officers combed through the woods. About 20 minutes later, one came back and said, "We found 3 people, 2 men and a woman, your roommate." She says she didn't know what was going on, but we found drugs on her and the others, plus text showing she planned this. They were going to lure you out here and rob you. I sat in the back of the patrol car, staring as they led her past me in cuffs. She didn't look afraid. She didn't even look ashamed, just cold. She locked eyes with me and whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." That sentence still echoes in my mind. The robbery charges didn't stick. She got probation for drug possession. I packed up and moved out the next week, changed my number, and never looked back. Sometimes when I drive past Mason Creek Park at night, I still see that lone light flickering at the far end of the lot, and my pulse quickens because I know she's still out there and she still remembers where I live. That semester stands out vividly in my memory because it almost didn't happen at all. I was in my final year of medical school, exhausted, broke, and barely hanging on, but determined to finish my internship. My name's Lena, and back then I'd been assigned to complete my rotation at Brenton General, a teaching hospital in a city I'd never lived in before. Most of my classmates got placements near home, but mine was nearly 4 hours away. I didn't have any family nearby, and by the time I applied for student housing, the hospital dorms were already full. Like most broke students, I went on a desperate search for somewhere cheap but livable. That's when my friend Riley, another classmate, texted me. "Riley, hey, where'd you end up?" Me, "Brenton General sucks, it's so far." Riley, "Wait, same. Want to split a place near the hospital?" It was a relief. I'd known Riley since our first year. She was witty, grounded, and we'd survived countless all-nighters together, so I trusted her completely. We found a place through a Facebook post, a small 2-person boarding room on Elmere Street in a quiet neighborhood just 1 bus stop away from the hospital. The landlady, Mrs. Porter, was an older woman who seemed pleasant but strict. She told us no male visitors overnight and reminded us to keep noise to a minimum. When we first moved in, it all felt fine. The room was small but tidy, white walls, wooden flooring, and a bunk bed to save space. Riley took the bottom bunk. I claimed the top. The first week passed easily. We'd wake before sunrise, catch the bus, then collapse at night after long shifts. Between patients and paperwork, we barely had the energy to speak, except for random late-night jokes about how medlife was killing us. But that changed one night. It was Thursday, and I was completely drained. The ER had been overflowing all day, and I hadn't eaten properly. Riley messaged that she was covering an extra shift since one of the interns called in sick. I decided to grab something from the McDonald's nearby. I remember that humid air, the faint buzz of the streetlights, and the sterile mix of coffee and disinfectant clinging to my scrubs. When I returned, it was close to 10:30 p.m. The building was silent, save for a faint creak in the hallway as I climbed the stairs. I locked the door behind me, climbed onto my bunk, and sank into the mattress. My body felt like lead. I scrolled through Facebook, half asleep, and messaged Riley. "Coming home tonight?" No reply. I kept scrolling through random videos. 5 minutes later, I heard the sharp click of the door unlocking. I was sure I'd locked it, but Riley had her own key, so I didn't think twice. The door opened and closed softly. I heard the sound of shoes being kicked off and the faint rustle of a plastic bag. The lower bunk shifted slightly. She must have climbed into bed. "Finally done," I mumbled. Her voice came softly from below. "Yeah, got us some breakfast stuff for tomorrow." I smiled faintly. "Nice, you're the best." We chatted lazily for a few minutes about the new resident who always messed up the charts, the vending machine that swallowed our coins, just meaningless chatter. Then she said quietly, "Can you turn the light off?" The switch was near the door, a few meters away. "Girl, you're closer," I muttered. "You do it." Her voice sounded weaker this time, strained. "I can't. My head's killing me." I sighed, pushed myself up, and sat on the edge of the bed. "Fine, I got it." I leaned over to complain again, and froze. The bed below was empty. The blanket was perfectly folded. Her backpack was gone. For a second, I couldn't process it. I looked down again. Nothing. My eyes darted toward the bathroom. Door open. Lights off. "Riley?" I whispered. No answer. Slowly, I climbed down the ladder, each creak echoing through the room. I checked under the bed, inside the closet, behind the bathroom door. Empty. Then my phone buzzed loudly, nearly making me drop it. A call. "Riley." I answered instantly. "Where are you?" I asked. Her voice came through with background noise, people talking, dishes clattering. "Still at the hospital," she said. "Sorry, didn't see your text. I'm heading to McDonald's right now. Want anything?" My voice came out in a whisper. "You're not home?" "No," she said, confused. "Why?" I didn't answer. I just ran, grabbed my phone, bolted out the door without shoes, and flew down the stairs. Mrs. Porter's door opened as I passed, but I didn't stop. I sprinted out into the street, heart pounding as people turned to stare from the 24-hour laundromat across the road. When I reached the McDonald's down the block, I saw her inside, wearing her scrubs and holding a paper bag. She frowned when she noticed me. "Lena, what's wrong?" I broke down right there, telling her everything, how I heard the door, talked to her, saw the bed move. She thought maybe I was half dreaming, until I showed her the call log. I'd spoken to her on the phone just minutes after that thing talked to me. We didn't go back that night. We checked into a cheap motel nearby and shared a bed, though neither of us slept. The next morning, we told Mrs. Porter we were leaving. She didn't seem shocked, only pressed her lips together and said quietly, "That room's been empty for months before you girls moved in." The last tenant was a nursing intern too. Poor soul never woke up one morning. That was all she said. Riley and I packed immediately and found another place near the hospital, even if it cost more. I couldn't bear to sleep in a bunk bed again. For months afterward, I'd wake to phantom creaks in the dark, certain that someone or something was lying beneath me, whispering, "Turn off the lights." Working nights at Walmart in a forgotten town did things to me I never expected. At first it was just a steady paycheck, a stopgap while I tried to rebuild my life. 2 years before, I'd left a small community college, not just because my grades were bad, but because my mom had fallen ill and I had to help cover expenses. When the overnight position stocking shelves and sometimes running the register opened up, it felt like a small kind of order. This wasn't one of those giant supercenters in a sprawling city. Our store sat on the edge of a dying Ohio town, right off a lonely 2-lane road. Past 10 p.m., only gas stations, a waffle diner, and our Walmart stayed open. The staff was a mix, older folks juggling second jobs, high school kids grabbing side cash, and people like me stuck somewhere in the middle trying to keep our heads above water. One of the people I bonded with was a 28-year-old named Mason. He was scruffy but approachable, always throwing out quips about how this store could drive someone off the deep end if they didn't keep busy. Back then, I assumed he was exaggerating. After what happened, I knew he wasn't. The first time I sensed something off was on a Tuesday night near the end of October. I was unloading Halloween stock plastic skeletons, fake webs, candy, and spotted Mason at the aisle's end, staring at his palms. "Yo, Mesa," I called, joking. "Don't tell me you're allergic to plastic spiders now." He raised his eyes slowly, dark rings under them like he hadn't slept in a week. "I don't know, man," he murmured, tapping his temple. "I'm not right up here." I gave a nervous laugh. "Join the club. Nobody's right pulling these shifts." He didn't even smile. He just stuffed his hands into his hoodie and walked off. During our 15-minute break, I pressed him. "You good? You've been weird lately." He hesitated, then said words that clung to me. "I've done things I can't undo, and now it feels like it's on me, like it's in here." His eyes darted to the walls like they were eavesdropping. I stumbled through the generic friend response. "Whatever it is, man, it'll be okay. We all screw up. Don't let it eat you." But what he gave me wasn't guilt, it was fear. He opened his mouth like he might explain, then shut it and said, "Forget it." Forget I said anything before leaving. 2 days later, Mason was dead. Word moved fast. Driving home from a shift, he collided with a semi. Some said he drifted lanes, others whispered he'd swerved on purpose. No one really knew. But his words kept circling back in my head. "It's following me." At first, it felt like grief. Everyone at the store was rattled. Even our stoic manager, who usually acted mechanical, gave a speech about leaning on each other. But within a week, things began to shift. Small at first. I'd be stocking candy at 3:30 a.m. and hear a child laugh echoing down an empty aisle. Not impossible, but unsettling. I'd check. Nothing. Once I swore a small shadow flickered between displays like a child darting out of sight, but following it led to nothing. I chalked it up to exhaustion. But one night at Register 9, I couldn't excuse it anymore. Around 2 a.m., only a few late-night customers drifted in. A middle-aged man grabbing groceries, a young woman buying formula. Then I noticed him, a boy, maybe 8, standing at the conveyor's end. He wasn't with anyone, just staring at me. "Hey, buddy," I said while scanning items. "Where are your parents?" He tilted his head, silent. When the customers left, I glanced back and froze. His face had changed. Half of it looked caved in, bone jutting through shredded skin, one eye swollen shut, the other glaring. His limbs bent at wrong angles, arms twisted like broken sticks, his clothes drenched in dark stains. A can slipped from my grip. "Jesus," I whispered, stepping back. He blinked and vanished. Shaken, I checked the cameras. No boy, no trace. For the next week, he appeared again and again in the toy aisle, at the corridor's edge, always silent, always mangled as if fresh from a violent wreck. Finally, one night in my car after work, I whispered, "What do you want from me?" From the empty passenger seat came a faint reply, "Not you." I nearly tore out of that parking lot. Things escalated quickly. A cashier, Dana, told me she'd seen a boy trailing her in paper goods. When she spun to scold him, she swore his jaw hung loose like it had snapped off. She quit the next week. A cart pusher named Ellis found a green rubber ball rolling across the lot one night. He picked it up and, for reasons he couldn't explain, felt an overwhelming grief. He threw it far, but back inside the store it was waiting for him by the doors. That's when pieces started fitting. Mason, his cryptic words, his death, the boy, the ball. One slow night I walked to the toy section without knowing what I sought, until I saw it, a brand new green rubber ball on the bottom shelf. I lifted it, and my hand went cold, like gripping ice. Then, right behind me, a boy's voice. "You dropped it." I spun, nothing but empty aisles. Every instinct screamed to run, but something deeper told me I had to understand. I kept the ball tucked under my arm, until shift's end. In the parking lot, footsteps dragged behind me. I turned and saw him, the boy, head tilted, crushed face dripping red, staring. "Why him?" I demanded. "Why Mason?" For the first time he spoke fully. His voice echoed like from a tunnel. He let me fall. The realization hit like a wave. Mason must have been babysitting him. Something happened. Accident. Neglect. The boy blamed him. Then why me? I asked. He raised a twisted hand toward the ball. "You carry me now." It dawned on me. Whoever held the ball bore him. I dropped it on the asphalt. It rolled slowly toward me as if it wanted to follow. I bolted into my car and sped off, leaving it behind. The next morning, dread crushed me walking into work. And there it was by the entrance, waiting. 2 weeks later, I quit Walmart. Sleep became impossible, paranoia constant, that boy's broken face flashing behind my eyes. I don't know what happened to the ball after I left. Maybe it's still on that shelf. Maybe someone else picked it up thinking it was a toy. But some nights driving past that dim Ohio store, I swear I see a child at the glass doors clutching a green rubber ball, waiting for someone new to carry him. And I keep driving. When I was 12 years old, that was the first time I truly understood what fear could feel like. Back then, I lived with my parents and younger brother in a small town in Kansas. We weren't broke, but we weren't thriving either. My father worked long shifts as a mechanic in a small garage, and my mother worked late nights at a roadside cafe on the edge of town. Saturdays were always grocery days, and like most families nearby, we went to the single big Walmart off the main highway. That Walmart back then felt almost like a maze. The sharp fluorescent lights, the endless rows of shelves where you could vanish between aisles, the little coin-eating arcade games near the entrance where kids begged to play. Those things made it feel like an outing. For me, it was a kind of freedom, because my parents sometimes let me and my younger brother wander off to look at CDs or books while they shopped. That day started out normal enough. It was early summer, unbearably hot, the kind of sticky Midwestern heat that made even a few minutes in a parked car miserable. My mom had a list a mile long. My dad wasn't with us because he was finishing a brake job at the shop. So it was just Mom, me, and my 9-year-old brother, Eric. We came in, Eric and I doing our usual thing, heading straight for the electronics while Mom steered the cart toward the cleaning section. I remember feeling like I was so grown up, the way 12-year-olds think they're independent. I crouched in the CD aisle to tie my shoe. That was when Eric started laughing. "What's so funny?" I asked, pulling my laces tight. He leaned in, lowering his voice as though about to share a secret. "That guy's staring at your butt." My head shot up, my face burning, half embarrassed, half irritated. "Knock it off, Eric." "I'm not joking," he said with a grin. "Only little brothers get when they think they've caught you." "He's right there. Look." I tried to be subtle, glancing up quickly, and sure enough, at the end of the aisle was an older man. He had a long gray beard, but the middle of it was braided, like some strange would-be Viking style. He wasn't even pretending not to stare. His eyes were directly on me. I swatted Eric on the arm, trying to laugh it away. "Gross. You're making that up." But he wouldn't drop it. "Bet he wants to marry you. You're gonna be his wife," he teased before darting down the aisle out of reach. I rolled my eyes and tried to shake it off, but when I stood, the man still hadn't turned away. His gaze shifted awkwardly, as if remembering to act normal, and he moved his eyes toward a rack of CDs. Something in my stomach churned like the first drop of a roller coaster. I left electronics planning to find Mom, but before that I stopped at the beauty aisle. I'd just begun paying attention to that sort of thing. Shampoos, lip gloss, face wash. So I figured I'd waste a minute there. That's when I noticed him again. Same man, same braided beard. Only this time he wasn't at the end of the aisle. He was in the same aisle, a few feet away, picking up random bottles of shampoo and flipping them like he couldn't read the labels. And every time I moved down, so did he. My palms went icy. I ducked into the next aisle, hoping I was imagining it. He followed. I tried again, this time heading into the one place I figured no man would voluntarily enter, the pads and tampon aisle. He won't come in here, I thought. But he did, holding a box of pads upside down, pretending to study the back, a grown man standing there like he belonged. Panic swelled, making me want to bolt, but my legs felt heavy. I stepped out fast, playing it cool, then hurried toward the main aisle until I saw my mom pushing the cart. Relief hit me like a wave. I rushed to her side. "Mom," I hissed. "What?" she asked, tossing paper towels into the cart. "There's this guy. He keeps following me." Her expression went sharp. My mother didn't mess around about her kids. She leaned closer. "Where?" I tipped my head toward the aisles. Gray beard braided in the middle. She didn't pause. "All right, you stay with me." If you see him again, clear your throat. If he gets close, cough. Understand?" I nodded. We walked down another aisle together, and there he was again, closer than before, close enough to reach out. I started clearing my throat, then coughing. My mom's head snapped toward me instantly. She saw him, her eyes hard as steel. She grabbed my arm and steered me straight to the front of the store. We found a manager and told him everything. I'll never forget the look on his face, like we were overreacting. "Well, ma'am, since he didn't actually touch her, there's not much we can do." My mom's face burned with anger. "So you're telling me a grown man can stalk a 12-year-old girl in your store and you're just going to shrug?" The manager muttered something about policy, but it didn't matter. My mom grabbed me and Eric and we left, abandoning the shopping. That should have been the end of it. Just a creepy memory fading with time. But it wasn't, because I kept seeing him. Every time we returned to that Walmart, he was there. Not always nearby, but near enough for me to notice. Sometimes in the parking lot, sometimes inside near the doors. That stupid braided beard made him impossible to forget. By the time I turned 16, I thought maybe I'd outgrown the fear. Until one night at my friend Jenna's house, we were sitting in her living room when her dad's buddy showed up. The instant he stepped in, my stomach knotted. Same man, same braided beard. Jenna's father greeted him. "Hey, Carl." Carl grinned at me like we were old pals, even calling me sweetheart. My hands went clammy. "Jenna," I whispered when we were alone. "That guy, he's the one who followed me around Walmart when I was 12. She shrugged like it was nothing. "Yeah, he's a little weird, but he's around a lot. Don't worry about it," but I couldn't stop worrying. Weeks later, Jenna tricked me into going with her to meet someone. We pulled up to a small house on the edge of town. A rough-looking woman let us in, handed us Cokes from the fridge, and then from the back room he appeared. "Carl, glad you girls came by," he said, smiling too wide. My skin crawled. He sat across from us and without hesitation began saying things no grown man should say to two teenage girls about taking our clothes off, about pictures, about sharing each other. I felt sick. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "We're not doing that." Jenna gave a nervous giggle, but I was furious at him, at her, at myself for even being there. We left soon after, and I swore never to let her drag me near him again. Years passed. I tried to bury the memory, but rumors spread. Then news broke that Carl had been arrested. Authorities had found photographs, dozens of children younger than me, younger than Jenna, doing horrific things. It turned out Jenna's own stepmother had been involved, letting kids stay around him. Both of them went to jail. She got out after 6 months. He didn't. Carl went away for good. The charges stacked so high he'd never walk free again. Years later, word came he'd died in prison. When I heard, I felt a weight lift I hadn't realized I was still carrying. For the first time since I was 12, I could breathe. One less monster roaming this earth. But even now, every time I walk into a Walmart, I still feel those cold eyes on me. I was never the kind of person who thought too hard about the danger of strangers. Of course, I reminded my daughters of the usual rules. Don't engage with unknown people, stay where I can see you, never follow someone out of a store. But deep down, I believed the odds of anything serious happening were tiny. That's the lie you live by in a small town, where the worst crimes are tipped mailboxes or teens sneaking off with stolen makeup. But that night shattered every belief I had about safety. My name is Marissa. I'm 33, divorced, and the main caretaker of my 2 girls. Their father exists more in name than presence. He drifts in sometimes, makes promises, then fades away. Years ago, I stopped relying on him. It's been just me, my daughters, and our daily rhythm. I work as a receptionist at a family health office about 20 minutes away. After work, it's the usual mayhem, schoolwork, dinner, baths, making sure nothing's forgotten for the next day. That Thursday, exhaustion pressed down hard. The kind of weariness that clings to your bones and makes even cooking seem impossible. The girls were already fussing about snacks, and on top of that, my 12-year-old Clara had been pestering me for new pajamas for weeks. I'd promised to get them before the weekend, so instead of collapsing on the couch, I loaded them into the car and headed to the nearby Walmart. The parking lot glowed under half-working yellow lamps. wrappers skittering in the cool wind. Inside, the scent of floor polish mixed with the popcorn stand at the entrance. My 8-year-old Lily grabbed the cart and hopped onto the bottom rack, her sneakers squealing as she pushed off. "Can we get Halloween candy?" she asked immediately. "We're here for school supplies and pajamas," I told her. "Candy later." "Later like tonight, or later like October," she moaned. Clara trailed behind, hood up, earbuds dangling. "You know she'll ask 100 more times, right?" she muttered. I grinned. "That's why you're here, big sister duty." Clara rolled her eyes but smiled faintly. We headed for the school supply section where notebooks and pens rose in towers. Lily darted between displays, lifting a glittery pencil case. "Put it back," I said. "You already have to." I was pulling folders off the shelf when a man rounded the corner too quickly, nearly colliding with us. He carried no cart, no basket, just moved fast like he had somewhere urgent to be. But as soon as he almost hit us, he stopped short. "Excuse me," I muttered instinctively. He didn't answer. He lowered his head, mumbled something I couldn't make out, then slipped sideways into the seasonal aisle. "Mom, look, candy pumpkins," Lily said, tugging my sleeve. The seasonal aisle glowed orange and black with plastic pumpkins, candy bags, and fake cobwebs. He was there, the man, not browsing like anyone else, just standing with one hand in the candy, his eyes flicking sideways at us. For a split second, our gazes met. He looked away so abruptly it made my skin prickle. "Can I take a picture?" Lily asked, pulling her little phone from her jacket. "Not now," I said, steering her along. But I could feel his stare lingering. We moved toward the women's section. I told myself I was imagining it. Big store, many shoppers, coincidence. Yet when Clara was rifling through pajama racks, that prickling came again. I looked up. Same man, now holding a huge bag of candy against his chest. Still no cart, still moving in that strange, unsettled way. He passed slowly, then veered toward the shoes. I exhaled hard. "Mom?" Clara whispered, stepping closer. "That's the same guy." I nodded. "You noticed too?" "Yeah, from the candy aisle. Now he's here. It's creepy." I didn't want to scare them, but I wouldn't ignore her instincts. "Stay close," I said. Lily tugged at a pajama set. "Can I get this one?" "Maybe. Hold on." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught him again, drifting through the boys' racks, not shopping, just wandering, stopping, looking. His eyes moved from me to Lily to Clara, then back to me. Coldness crawled over my spine. "Okay," I whispered to Clara. "I think he's following us. Get Lily in the cart." Clara's eyes widened. "Seriously? Just do it." Lily groaned but climbed in. The man slipped out of the aisle. For a second I felt relief, until I realized he'd only looped around, keeping a clear line of sight on us. Our eyes met. He twitched, then pulled out his phone, typing furiously. My pulse thudded. That's when I noticed the others. By electronics. An older man in a baseball cap pretended to look at a half-empty video game shelf. Every so often he glanced our way. Not quick glances, hard ones you can feel even far off. And near the baby clothes, a third man drifted, picking up a onesie, putting it back, circling again. His eyes kept darting toward us. The realization hit like ice. This wasn't random. "Girls," I said, forcing calm. "We're checking out now." Clara looked at me, suddenly serious. "Are we in danger?" I swallowed. "We just need to go." I pushed the cart fast, my grip so tight my knuckles hurt. Each aisle I turned, I checked behind us. The Candyman stayed 2 rows over, keeping pace. The man in the cap shifted to follow at a distance. "Mom, I'm scared," Lily whispered. "I know, baby, stay down." I pulled her into a crouch inside the cart. By the time we reached the front, my heart hammered so loud I thought others could hear. The self-checkout lanes were jammed, too easy to get trapped. "Excuse me," I said to a worker stocking shelves, my voice trembling. "Can you call security up here?" The kid blinked. What for?" "There are men following us, please." He stared, then nodded quickly, grabbing his radio. That's when I saw him again. The Candyman stood at the edge of self-checkout, phone still in hand, watching. The other 2 were further back, pretending to browse. I paid as fast as I could, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my card once. The girls clung to my sides. When we headed for the exit, I risked one last look. All three men stood still, unmoving, staring. As the sliding doors opened and night air hit my face, I saw him, Candyman, outside under the buzzing lamp, eyes locked on mine. I gripped my daughter's hands so hard they yelped. We didn't go straight to the car. We cut across the lot fast toward a cluster of people walking in. I didn't stop until we were surrounded, until a security guard jogged out toward us. When I finally looked back, the man was gone. That was months ago. I've replayed it hundreds of times. What if I hadn't noticed? What if the girls had wandered off for even a minute? I still shop at Walmart, but never that location and never alone with my daughters. Because deep down, I can't shake the certainty that night wasn't an accident. It was a plan. And we came too close to being part of it. I once believed late-night grocery runs were harmless, but at 15 I discovered how fragile that feeling of safety really was. Nearly a decade later, I still find myself double-checking locks and scanning parking lots before walking to my car. I grew up in a gritty Appalachian-style industrial town, not the sensational kind that hits headlines every day, but the type where everyone knew someone who had been locked up, and the police scanner buzzed constantly. Drug busts, brawls, and break-ins were just the soundtrack of life. My dad always warned, if you don't keep your head straight, this town will chew you up. That evening started like any other. My dad, my younger sister Mallory, and I decided to make a quick run to Walmart for groceries. It was a Wednesday night late in October. The air crisp, the kind of chill that pushes your hands deep into hoodie pockets. The glowing Walmart sign hummed above us like a neon beacon. Inside was the usual late-night vibe. A few tired employees stocking shelves, families with overflowing carts, and the town's regular drifters moving between aisles. Mallory and I were acting like our usual annoying selves, cracking jokes and trying to make each other laugh. She nudged me with an elbow. "Yo, check aisle 7. Creeper alert." I followed her gaze. There he was. A man maybe in his late 40s or early 50s, stringy brown hair parted down the middle, greasy enough to glint under the lights, thick glasses sliding down his nose, an oversized beige jacket draping awkwardly over his thin body. He looked like showers weren't part of his week. "Looks like a full-on predator sting," Mallory whispered, giggling. "Shut up," I muttered, though I couldn't stop smirking. But once we noticed him, he seemed to pop up everywhere, pretending to browse cereal, pretending to study canned soup, hovering near the Halloween candy. At first, I brushed it off. People wander in stores, maybe he was shopping like anyone else. Plus, Dad was with us, 6'3", broad-shouldered, carrying himself like a man you didn't cross. Still, that man stayed in my head long after we left. For the next week, I woke in the middle of the night for no reason, feeling as if someone stood at the foot of my bed. I'd sit up, scan my dark room, and tell myself it was nothing. Our old house creaked, wind slid through cracks, and I'd grown up on ghost stories. Mom always swore the place was haunted, but this didn't feel supernatural. It felt filthy. It felt wrong. By the second week, exhaustion hit me so hard I couldn't focus in class. My mom scolded me, blaming the caffeine I downed every day. But deep down, I knew soda wasn't what kept me awake. Something was off. Then came the Saturday that still scorches my memory. My parents planned a day trip to a small town hours away. Mallory stayed at a friend's house. That left me home alone. Normally, I liked it. Music blasting, junk food, gaming without anyone nagging me. But that morning, from the instant I woke up, I felt wired and uneasy, like the walls themselves were watching. By mid-afternoon, I'd had enough. I texted my friend Kevin. "Me. Yo, wanna hang? Losing my mind here. Kevin, bet, 10 minutes. Bring snacks." When he pulled up, I bolted out the door like it was on fire. Sliding into his dented old Honda, I finally exhaled. We drove aimlessly, music low, just talking. But Kevin kept glancing at his rearview mirror. "You good?" I asked. He nodded too quickly, eyes flicking again. "Yeah, it's just this car's been tailing me since I picked you up." A chill crawled up my spine. "What kind of car?" Kevin squinted. "Blue Chevy, old beat to hell." I twisted in my seat. The car behind us swerved too close, then pulled up beside my window at the stoplight. That's when I saw him, the man from Walmart. His greasy hair, his oversized beige jacket, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth looked like they'd snap. and those eyes flat, empty, fixed on me like I was prey. "Holy crap," I whispered. "What?" Kevin asked, hands tightening on the wheel. "It's him," I said, "the guy from Walmart." Before I could finish, the man laid on his horn. The blast ripped through the night. I flinched, curling into the seat. "Screw this," Kevin muttered. The light turned green. He hit the gas, weaving through traffic. "We're going to the station." It was only 5 minutes to the police station, but it felt like an eternity. My pulse hammered, breaths coming shallow. When we pulled in, the man didn't follow us inside, but parked across the street, watching. Inside, we found Officer Denton, a friend's dad. Kevin, thinking fast, had memorized the guy's license plate. Denton scribbled it down, his face hardening as he typed it in. "Stay here," he said. "We'll send a car to your house, just in case." My phone buzzed, Mom calling, panicked after hearing from the station. I could barely form words. When officers checked my yard, what they discovered froze my blood. The man was there, crouched outside my bedroom window, digging in the bushes. He had a crowbar, duct tape, zip ties, condoms, a taser, hidden in a backpack under the leaves. They arrested him on the spot. He turned out to be a registered sex offender who'd been stalking me for weeks, planning. Suddenly, all those nights waking with that crawling feeling made sense. The trial blurred past. My parents pressed charges. He went away. But that didn't erase what happened. Even now, I wake up some nights, heart racing, convinced I'm being watched, and I'll never laugh off creepy Walmart guy jokes again, because sometimes it's not a joke, sometimes it's real, and sometimes trusting your instincts is the only thing that keeps you alive. I'm 23 years old, female, and moved here a few months ago for college. Uprooting myself from my old life was supposed to be a clean slate. In my hometown, everyone recognized me, teachers, neighbors, even the guy at the corner gas station. Here, I blend into the crowd, and that mix of anonymity and exposure feels both freeing and unnerving. My apartment is small, a single bedroom with worn carpet and pipes that screech at night, but it's my space, and I take pride in it. That Saturday around 3 p.m., I decided to drive to the closest Walmart to stock up on cleaning products. I delayed it all week as assignments piled up and exhaustion set in, but that afternoon something inside me wanted to reset, to scrub everything down and make the place truly feel like mine. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. The parking lot was jammed, stray carts scattered near the entrance. Muttering under my breath, I steered around them and squeezed my car into a tight space, careful not to clip a loose cart. Purse in hand, I stepped out and walked toward the sliding glass doors. That's when I spotted him, an older man leaning against the cart corral just outside. He looked mid-50s or early 60s, maybe older, wearing a washed-out baseball cap and a tucked-in flannel shirt over jeans. His skin looked weathered, like someone who spent endless hours under harsh sunlight. Our eyes met for a split second. Out of instinct, I gave a courteous nod, the kind strangers exchange to acknowledge each other. He didn't nod back, didn't smile, just stared. I brushed it off and kept walking as the automatic doors whooshed open and a gust of cool air conditioning hit my face. I grabbed a cart and steered toward the school supply section. All I needed was a binder or maybe a few folders. While scanning bright notebooks lined on the shelves, a faint squeak of sneakers came from behind. Tilting my head slightly, I caught sight of him again. The man from outside. He stood at the aisle's edge, holding a pack of paper plates covered in cartoon pumpkins, though his gaze wasn't on the plates. It was fixed on me. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he had grandchildren. Maybe he was shopping for a party. Still, a wave of unease prickled at me. I shoved a binder into my cart and made my way toward the back of the store where the electronics were. I needed a phone charger anyway. That section was quieter than the rest, filled with glass-locked displays of chargers, headphones, and controllers. I crouched to check the lower shelves, searching for the right charger. In the reflection of the glass, I suddenly saw him. He was moving slowly past me, his eyes tracking me from shoulders to legs. When he slipped behind me, I glimpsed him from the corner of my vision, his mouth slack as his tongue darted out to wet his lips. I froze and forced myself to breathe. Don't react. Don't draw attention. Maybe he'll leave. But he didn't. He stood right behind me, uncomfortably close. "Excuse me?" I muttered, Pretending to study the shelf, my voice kept as steady as possible. He stayed silent, still burning his stare into me. Only after a long moment did he step away toward another display, and I exhaled a shaky breath of relief. Pushing my cart into the next aisle, I tried to appear normal, though my hands trembled against the handle. To test myself, I lingered by some random headphones, pretending to compare prices while peeking down the main walkway. Then I saw him again. He was speed-walking, scanning left and right like he was hunting for someone. The instant he spotted me, he froze. Our eyes locked. His expression didn't hold embarrassment or surprise, but something darker. He turned sharply and hurried off. My gut told me this wasn't coincidence anymore. I wheeled straight over to the counter where two employees stood, one tall with glasses, maybe in his 20s, the other shorter and stocky with a buzz cut. "Hey," I said quietly, "I think someone's following me." Both looked up at once. "What do you mean?" Buzzcut asked. I described the older man, flannel, cap, and how he'd been appearing everywhere I went, even searching aisles. "I don't feel safe. Search my level and look at tuppeten. Gad I chukube even. Right up from us." Glasses frowned. "We don't have actual security here, just asset protection, but we can stay with you or ring you up right here so you don't have to go up front." The kindness nearly undid me. "Yes, please. I just need a few cleaning supplies, then I'll leave." "All right," Buzzcut said firmly. "We'll walk with you." As we turned the corner with my cart, my stomach nodded again. He was there at the far end of the main walkway near the registers. Not close enough to overhear, but close enough to watch. His eyes snapped to mine instantly. He didn't move or blink, just stared. The employees noticed too. "That him?" Glasses muttered. "Yes," I whispered. Buzzcut squared his shoulders. "Just keep walking. He won't try anything with us here." We moved fast through the aisles, grabbing a mop, sponges, and a bottle of bleach. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. When we circled back to the electronics counter to check out, I risked one last glance. He was gone. We finished the transaction and Buzzcut carried my bag. "You want us to walk you to your car?" Glasses asked. "Yes, please." Together we headed for the exit. My eyes darted everywhere, heart pounding in my ears, but I didn't see him. Still, paranoia gnawed at me. Outside, I thanked them both again and made my way to my car. I climbed in, locked the doors immediately, and sat there trying to calm down. I couldn't drive straight home. What if he was waiting? What if he followed me? So I drove to a random neighborhood halfway between Walmart and my apartment, parked in front of a house pretending it was mine, and waited 10 minutes scanning the mirrors. No cars slowed, no sign of him. Finally, I circled the block twice and then headed home. That night, every light in my apartment blazed as I clutched my pepper spray. Every creak from the building jolted me. What terrified me most wasn't what had happened inside the store. It was what might have happened if I hadn't noticed him in the reflection, if I hadn't caught him speed-walking the aisles searching for me. He had no idea I'd seen his face when he licked his lips, staring at me like I was something consumable. I don't know if he planned to grab me in the parking lot or follow me home, but I do know one thing. Whatever his intentions, they weren't good. And now, each time I step inside that store, my eyes scan every aisle and corner, wondering if he's there again, waiting.